Chapter 1. The Dust of Forgotten Scrolls. The archives were a prison without bars. Lyra sat at a long oak table, ink-stained fingers smudging over brittle parchment as the air filled with the smell of vellum and candle smoke. Rows upon rows of scrolls stretched into the shadows, stacked higher than she could reach. Every breath carried the weight of centuries. "Again," said Master Therion, his voice clipped, disapproving. "You're cataloguing these as if they were sword drills. Slow, deliberate, with respect." Lyra gritted her teeth. Sword drills she could endure. This was different. This was suffocation. Her blades had been taken, her training suspended. Instead of sparring fields, she was chained to dusty tomes and Therion's lectures. The council called it reclassification duty. She called it exile in waiting. Yet even here Lyra's mind wandered to the margins. Every scroll told a story of the realms. Treaties, lost wars, forgotten portals, maps etched with ley line flows. Secrets the Guardians thought safe, buried beneath dust. And Lyra, restless as ever, was listening. Her eyes lingered on one cracked case in particular, the wax seal half broken. She hesitated, fingers twitching. When night came, she shed ink-stained robes for the padded tunic of a duelist. The training yard was quiet, torchlight throwing jagged shadows across the stone. "You're late," barked Weapons Master Kalen, a broad-shouldered elf with eyes sharp as glass. He held out a practice dagger. "Again!" Lyra caught it, spinning the blade in her hand before stepping into stance. "I'm not supposed to have field work," she said, smirking. "No one ever said anything about training." Kalen's strike came fast, testing. She parried with a snap, the clash of steel ringing in the air. Sweat already dampened her brow, but she pressed harder. The archives had bound her, but here she was free. Every thrust and counter a reminder that her edge hadn't dulled. By day, dust clung to her fingertips. By night, sweat slicked her skin. Knowledge she never wanted in the morning, strength she refused to lose in the dark. And slowly she realized both were making her dangerous. By the time Kalen dismissed her, Lyra's arms ached and her tunic clung with sweat. Her knuckles were raw, the practice dagger biting harder with each parry until she finally dropped it, panting. "Better," Kalen said, his voice like gravel. He turned away without another word, already resetting the yard for tomorrow's lesson. Lyra smirked through the sting in her muscles. She'd take his gruff silence over Therion's endless lectures any day. The corridors back to the apprentices' quarters were silent, moonlight spilling through the arched windows. She eased open the door to her room, boots muffled against the rug. Eliana looked up from her desk, quill poised above parchment. Her hair caught the lantern light like spun silver. "Late again," she said flatly. Lyra shrugged, tossing her tunic onto the bed. "I file scrolls all day. You expect me to just sleep?" "You're supposed to be reflecting," Eliana replied, eyes narrowing. "That's what the council ordered." "I am reflecting," Lyra shot back, tugging loose the ties of her practice wrap, "on how dull parchment is compared to a blade." Eliana's quill scratched against the page again. "You're going to push too far. One more misstep, and they'll do worse than restrict you." Lyra flopped back onto her bed, staring up at the ceiling beams. Maybe worse would be better. For a moment, silence stretched between them, the tension as sharp as steel. Eliana dipped her quill again, refusing to answer. Lyra smirked into the shadows. She wasn't sure what chafed Eliana more, her defiance, or the fact that she'd found a loophole. Morning brought the same smell of vellum and lamp oil, but the room didn't feel the same to Lyra. Yesterday it had been a maze. Today it was a lock, and locks had patterns. Therion didn't greet her. He never did. He simply slid a stack of cylindrical cases across the oak. 5 wax seals, 5 different ribbons. "Reclassification queue," he said. "Place them where they actually belong, not where the last fool thought they did." His finger tapped the top case. "Start there." He turned away, already scratching notes onto a ledger that looked heavy enough to stop a blade. Lyra rolled the first case into her palm. Wax seal, amber, impressed with a tri-ring sigil. Ribbon, grey, edge-stitched in silver thread. She hadn't noticed the stitching yesterday. She studied the case. Amber wax, tri-ring sigil, grey ribbon with silver stitching. Cross-realm contact, draft status, council reviewed. Her eyes swept the room until she found what she was looking for. A dusty annex table with the tri-ring symbol inlaid in its surface. The system wasn't written on the scrolls. It was written around them. Inside lay reference cards with coded holes. She matched the pattern, read the entry. Contact protocols for unregistered gateways, pending Maelorian's review. She filed it where the code directed. Felt the ward's approving tug. Correct. Therian's quill paused. He didn't look up. You're slower today. I'm correct today, Lyra said, too smoothly to be defiance. The quill scratched on. By midday, she could feel the map of the room in her bones, how grey ribbon drafts drifted towards spiral shelves until silver-stitched copies pulled them sideways into council tables. In the far corner, an end cap of the river shelf, ley-line topography, carried dust that didn't settle evenly. The top layer was speckled with lighter patches, finger marks in reverse, where someone had wiped clean circles and then let new dust fall. Not Therian. His hands always smelled of ink, and his sleeves were immaculate. Someone else. Recently. When she reached for the end cap, a cane tip marked the floor beside her boot. Leave that, Therian said, finally close enough to cast a shadow over her shoulder. His tone didn't rise. It didn't need to. You're not trained for those, Lyra straightened. Ley maps? Maps that pretend they are, he said. File your queue. Some of these were misfiled on purpose. Most things are, he said, and moved away. She watched him go, then looked back at the end cap. The dust told a story. A circle, a line. Fingers had lifted twice, then dragged. A pattern, a code, or a nervous habit. She filed the knowledge with the same care she placed the cases. Not on paper, but where she wouldn't forget. Therian's shadow fell across her table again. He set down a narrow, slate-coloured case with a simple iron band. No wax. No ribbon. Where? He asked. Lyra wiped a smudge of ink from her thumb and didn't answer immediately. She turned the case, inspected the iron band, found the microscopic notch cut into the hinge. Not decorative. Counting notch, like the draw's cards. She looked past him to the alcove where the spiral shelf met the broken circle. Between them, a thin half-bay with no sigil and a strip of wood left unvarnished. A place no one bothered to polish because no one filed there. She lifted the case, crossed the room, and slid it onto the unvarnished strip. It vanished a fraction deeper than the wood allowed, catching on a ward Lyra couldn't see. Therian's cane ticked once against the stone. Approval or simply rhythm. With him, it was hard to tell. Again tomorrow, he said. Lyra gathered the last of her cue. Her back ached, her fingers were stained, but when she looked across the shelves now, she didn't see a prison. She saw a map, and maps were for moving. The training yard smelled of oil and sweat, torches guttering against the chill. Weapons Master Kalen laid out the evening's selection with a grunt, longsword, spear, curved blade, and, at the end, 2 slim practice daggers. Choose, he said, folding his arms. Lyra reached first for the bow. The string thrummed smooth against her fingers, the shot clean. She hit her mark again and again until Kalen gave a rare grunt of approval. But the distance gnawed at her. Striking from afar felt detached. The longsword came next, solid, powerful. She moved well with it, sweeping arcs smooth enough to catch Kalen's nod, but the heft dulled her speed. She was too quick, too precise to be satisfied by weight alone. Finally, her gaze slid to the daggers. She picked them up, one in each hand. Their balance was perfect, light as breath but sharp enough to promise pain. When she moved, they didn't just cut air. They carved space around her, the rhythm fast, intimate. Kalen's eyes narrowed. Again. She spun low, blades crossing, driving forward. The daggers moved like extensions of her own will. She could close the gap in a heartbeat, slip past a guard, strike before breath became a warning. Up close, there were no masks. No distance. Just her and her opponent, and the truth of steel between them. Lyra's chest rose and fell as she lowered the blades. Sweat dampened her hair, but a grin tugged at her lips. "They suit you," Kalen said, his voice low. "Too much, perhaps." Lyra twirled one dagger in her palm, feeling its weight settle into her bones. "Maybe they're the only ones that tell the truth." Lyra slipped back into the dormitory well past curfew, tunic clinging with sweat, hair damp at the temples. She eased the door shut behind her, but the faint scratch-scratch of quill on parchment betrayed Eliana's wakefulness. "You reek of the yard," Eliana said without looking up. The lantern cast silver light across her desk, scrolls fanned like wings. Lyra flopped onto her bed, stretching sore arms behind her head. "Better than reeking of dust." For a moment, the only sound was quill to parchment. Then Eliana set it down, turning. Her eyes caught Lyra's in the half-light, sharp and searching. "Why do you keep doing this?" she asked. "You file scrolls all day, then train all night as if the council's orders mean nothing." "Do you even understand what was given to you?" Lyra arched a brow. "Given to me. My father fought for his post. Yours." Eliana hesitated, then pressed on. "Your father spoke to the council himself. He pulled every string he could to place you here with Malorian. Do you think that was chance? Do you think it cost him nothing?" The words cut sharper than any blade. Lyra rolled onto her side, away from Eliana's gaze. The memory of her father's voice, warm, steady, the diplomat's tone, slid against the back of her mind. "I didn't ask him to," she muttered. "No," Eliana said, softer now. "But you're wasting it. Every day you flout orders. Every night you run off. You're throwing away what he bled for, what he believed you could be." Lyra's hands curled into fists against the sheets. She wanted to snap back, to laugh, to dismiss it all. But the silence stretched instead. She only breathed, shallow, eyes fixed on the wooden beams overhead. Finally, she forced a smile, bitter and crooked. "Maybe what he thought I could be isn't what I am." Eliana shook her head and turned back to her parchment, the scratch of quill resuming. But her voice lingered, quiet enough to almost disappear. "Or maybe you're just afraid to be it." Chapter 2. Dust and Ash. The back corner of the archives was colder than the rest, a place where light from the lanterns never quite reached. Dust lay so thick it softened her footsteps, and the shelves sagged, beneath the weight of centuries. Therian's cane had tapped once against the floor, his voice flat as ever. "Sort this rot. If anything crumbles, record the seal and discard the rest." Lyra dragged her sleeve across a shelf and coughed as grit swirled into the lamplight. "Rot," she muttered, echoing Therian's words from earlier in the day. "All of it." She worked in silence, stacking cases with the dull patience her punishment demanded, until her fingers snagged on a cracked leather tube wedged sideways at the back of a bay. She tugged it free, coughing as a sheet of dust rained down. The seal was half-eaten with age, wax brittle, but the sigil pressed into it was unmistakable. A jagged flame encircled by runes she couldn't read. Her breath stilled. She had seen this before. Weeks ago, she and Eliana had stepped out of a portal carrying a scroll marked just the same, placing it into Malorian's hands under the eyes of the senior three. They had brought it back from the forgotten realm of Thandros, the land of the Emberborn. And yet here it was again. Not the same scroll. Older, the leather cracked, the wax seal dulled, but bearing the same mark. A record the archives had held all along. Her heart kicked. They knew. The council knew of Thandros, and buried it here where no one would ever look. She brushed her thumb over the sigil, the faint grooves catching against her skin. A surge of defiance burned in her chest. This wasn't rot. This was truth. "Put that down." Therian's voice cut sharp through the dust. His cane struck the floor as he closed the distance, quicker than she'd thought he could move. Lyra straightened, scroll still in hand. "It's misfiled," she said carefully. "It is restricted," Therian snapped. He snatched it from her grip, tucking it beneath his arm as if her touch had contaminated it. "If you find another, you do not open it. You do not read it. You do not think on it. You bring it to me. Do you understand?" Her jaw tightened. "Perfectly." But as he strode away, cane clicking sharp against the stones, Lyra's mind seethed. The council had lied. They hadn't discovered Thandros with her and Aeliana. They had rediscovered it. And that meant there were secrets layered beneath secrets, waiting to be unearthed. Lyra lunged this time, twin trainers flashing quick in the torchlight. Kaelin met her with a sweep of his staff, catching both strikes and rolling the haft to shove her back. She snarled, pressed in harder, driving a flurry of blows meant to overwhelm. For a breath, she thought she had him. Then the staff flicked low, hooking her ankle. The ground slammed up into her again, harder than before. Dust filled her mouth as she spat, rolling to her side. Kaelin planted the butt of his staff beside her ear. Unfocused. Again, Lyra pushed herself upright, furious. "You think I can't—" "I think you're carrying the archives into the yard," he cut her off. "And until you learn to leave them at the door, you'll keep ending up on your back." She froze, chest heaving. He'd seen through her more cleanly than any strike. Kaelin stepped back, lowering the staff. "Enough. You're dismissed for the night." Her mouth opened in protest, but his glare silenced her. "Meditate," he ordered. "Clear your head. When you come back tomorrow, you will be present. Or I won't waste my time putting you on the ground. I'll tell Therian to keep you in the dust where you belong." Lyra tightened her grip on the daggers until her knuckles went white. She wanted to argue, to demand another round, to prove him wrong, but the fire in his eyes told her he wasn't bluffing. She dropped the trainers with a clatter, the sound echoing in the quiet yard. "Yes, master," she said, her voice clipped. Kaelin nodded once, turning away. The torches hissed, the yard settling into silence. Lyra stood alone, chest still tight, the sigil of Thandros burning at the back of her thoughts. "Meditate," he'd said. She wasn't sure she knew how, but she knew one thing for certain. Whatever secret the council had buried, it was worth falling flat 100 times to uncover. Lyra slipped into the dormitory earlier than usual, tunic still damp with sweat. She dropped her trainers onto the foot of her bed, the wood clattering louder than she meant. Eliana's quill paused mid-scratch. She turned, brows raised. "Back early?" "Did you finally exhaust yourself?" Lyra snorted, tugging at the laces of her boots. "Got dismissed." That earned her a sharper look. "Dismissed?" "Apparently my head wasn't in it." Lyra flopped onto the bed, wincing at the bruise along her ribs. "Guess he was right." Eliana leaned back in her chair, studying her. "And why wasn't it?" For a moment, Lyra said nothing. The image of the cracked seal pressed against her mind like a hot brand. That jagged flame, those runes. The council had known they'd hidden it. She almost let it slip. Almost. "There was something in the archives today," she said carefully, eyes fixed on the ceiling beams. "Something that didn't belong." Aeliana straightened. "What kind of something?" Lyra rolled onto her side, propping her head on one hand. "A scroll. Old, dustier than the rest. Marked like the one we carried back from Thandros." Aeliana's eyes widened, a sharp inhale betraying her surprise. "Another?" "Therian snatched it before I could study it. Locked it away like it was poison." Silence stretched, heavy between them. Finally, Aeliana spoke. "We should tell Mylorian." Lyra sat up fast, shaking her head. "No. He's council, Aeliana. Whatever they're hiding, he's part of it." "He's not just council," Aeliana shot back. "He's my mentor. Yours too, once. If anyone can explain why." "Or cover it up better than the rest," Lyra cut her off. Her voice was sharper than she intended, but the words burned too much to hold back. They knew about Thandros. They buried it. And now you want me to believe they'll suddenly start giving us the truth? Eliana's jaw tightened, hurt flashing across her features. Not all of them lie, Lyra. Maybe, Lyra muttered, lying back down and dragging her blanket over her shoulder. But I'm not betting my life on maybe. Lyra's words hung sharp in the air. I'm not betting my life on maybe. Eliana turned in her chair, eyes hard, shoulders squared. And what would you do instead? Pretend you didn't see it? Keep training at night until you're too bruised to think straight? Lyra pushed up on an elbow, smirking despite the ache in her ribs. Maybe I'd do what you won't. Go back in, find that scroll and actually read it before Therion locks it away forever. You'd risk exile for that. Eliana's voice was tight, clipped, but not dismissive. I'm already halfway there. Lyra swung her legs over the side of the bed, leaning forward. You saw his face, Eliana. He knew what it was. He knew. And instead of telling us, he buried it. Don't you want to know why? Eliana's fingers tightened around her quill until it cracked, ink bleeding across the parchment. Her silence was answer enough. Lyra pressed on, softer now, coaxing. We don't need permission. We don't need their blessing. We just need to lay hands on it, read it, and know for ourselves. Finally, Eliana met her gaze, hazel eyes sharp in the lantern light. If we do this, and we're caught, then we'll both be in the dust with the rest of their secrets, Lyra said with a crooked grin. But at least we'll know. The tension between them thrummed like a drawn bowstring. Eliana exhaled slowly, eyes narrowing as if weighing the weight of her oath against the pull of curiosity. Tomorrow night, she said at last, if you're serious. Lyra's grin widened. I'm always serious. Chapter 3. Cracks in the Shelves. The next morning, Lyra entered the archives with her usual mask of boredom. Therion was already there, Kane tapping a steady rhythm as he checked ledgers and muttered about misfiled centuries. She set to work without protest. No arguments, no smirks, just careful hands moving scrolls where they belonged. To Therion, she looked subdued. To anyone else, obedient. But her eyes never stopped watching. Every time Therion passed the spiral shelves, his pace slowed. The cane ticked twice against the floorboards. Not random, not habit. A pattern. He always paused at the end cap where the dust had been disturbed yesterday, where she'd seen those faint circles brushed into the grime. By midday, she knew, he hadn't carried the Thandros scroll far. He'd buried it in the archives themselves, hidden in plain sight. When Therion left for the scriptorium, she drifted casually past the shelf, sliding her hand along the carved edge. To most, it was just wood. To her trained fingers, the faintest seam whispered back. She crouched, pretending to stack loose cases, and pressed the seam. A quiet click answered. A concealed drawer, cleverly fitted into the end cap. The ward prickled against her skin but didn't bite. Not a guardian's lock, just an archivist's ward. Lyra let her hand fall away before anyone noticed. Her pulse thundered in her ears. She knew where it was now. And better, she knew how to get to it. She forced her hands back to the stack of scrolls, fingers trembling slightly as she slid them into their bays. To anyone watching, she was just another apprentice drowning in parchment. Inside, her thoughts raced. Not a guardian's lock. Not deadly. Just an archivist's ward. Meant to keep out the curious, not the determined. And now she knew exactly where it was. Across the hall, Therion's cane ticked its usual rhythm as he paced, muttering about lazy scribes. Lyra risked a glance. He didn't look her way, but she couldn't shake the thought. He knows it's here. He's always known. She dropped the last scroll into its slot and straightened. Her pulse hadn't slowed. On her way to the exit, she slowed near the rear alcove, a narrow door set flush into the wall. She'd seen scribes use it before, carting supplies from the storerooms, but never during her shifts. Tonight, unattended, she let her hand trail casually down the frame. The latch was stiff. Old. She pressed her thumb against it, felt the faintest give. Not warded like the main gates, just a simple iron tongue sunk deep into the jamb. Her heart thudded. With a glance over her shoulder, Therian still muttering, quill scratching, she slipped a thin pick from her sleeve, pretending to adjust her cuff. She eased it into the narrow gap above the latch and gave it the smallest twist. Click. The latch lifted. The door shifted a finger's width, cool air whispering out. Lyra's breath caught. She pressed it closed again, drawing the bolt gently back into place. No one had noticed. No alarms. Her palms were damp as she wiped them on her tunic. She had just given herself a way in. A door most had forgotten, loose now under her hand. Tonight she would leave it locked for show, but she knew the trick, knew the weakness. When she came back, she could open it again, and the council's secrets would be hers. Lyra left the archives with her expression carefully blank, though her heart still drummed from what she'd done. The memory of the latch giving under her hand wouldn't let her go. She'd cracked it. The door was hers now. Before heading to the dormitories, she cut across the training yard. Caelan was already there, torchlight glinting off the steel rack as he laid out weapons for the evening drills. "You're late," he barked when he spotted her. "Not tonight," Lyra said quickly, forcing her tone casual. "I've work stacked to the ceiling. Therion will have my head if I don't finish." Caelan narrowed his eyes, measuring her. He always did. Then, with a grunt, he turned back to the rack. "Tomorrow, then. And come sharp. I won't have you going soft." Lyra dipped her head, hiding her relief. "Tomorrow," she promised, slipping away before he could change his mind. The corridors to the dormitory were quiet, lamplight dimming as night settled in. She pushed through the door she shared with Eliana, then pulled it shut again almost immediately. Eliana looked up from her desk, startled. "Not here," Lyra whispered. "Too many ears." Suspicion flickered across Eliana's face, but she rose, setting her quill aside. Lyra led her back into the hall, then down a side stair that emptied into a half-forgotten cloister. The air smelled of moss and stone, a fountain trickling faintly in the shadows. Here, no footsteps echoed, no voices carried. Lyra turned, eyes bright even in the gloom. "I found us a way in." The fountain whispered in the shadows as Lyra leaned close, voice low but fierce. "I tested the archives tonight. The rear service door. Old lock, weak ward. I slipped it. No alarms, no guards. It's ours." Eliana's brow furrowed, her arms folding tight across her chest. "Lyra, do you hear yourself? If you're caught—" "I won't be. You will." Eliana's voice rose, then softened again as she glanced around the empty cloister. "You think Therion won't notice? You think Maelorian won't hear of it? This is madness." Lyra stepped closer, eyes glinting in the lantern light. "Madness is trusting them after what we saw. That scroll wasn't supposed to exist, but there it was, marked the same as the one we bled for, hidden in dust, like it never mattered. They've known, Eliana, they've known all along." Eliana's jaw clenched, torn between anger and doubt. "So what? Even if that's true, we don't have the right to break in. We're bound by—" "By what?" Lyra snapped. "By rules written to keep us blind? By oaths that let them decide what's truth and what's ash?" She stepped back, gesturing sharply. "I don't need their permission. I need answers. And I'm not asking you to approve. I'm asking if you're coming with me." Silence stretched. The fountain trickled. Eliana looked at her, really looked at her. Lyra's defiance, her fire, the certainty in her eyes. The same recklessness that would get her killed, or uncover something the council never wanted them to see. Finally, Eliana exhaled, shoulders slumping. "If you do this alone, you'll hang yourself." Lyra's grin was quick, triumphant. "So don't let me." Eliana closed her eyes for a long breath, then nodded once, sharp and resigned. "We go together." Lyra's heart surged, her smirk softening into something brighter. "Knew you couldn't resist." Eliana shot her a withering look, but there was no weight behind it. The choice was made. Chapter 4. Into the Dust. The halls of the citadel slept, heavy with silence. Moonlight spilled in cold strips through arched windows, painting the floor in pale silver. Lyra moved first, her steps quick and quiet, cloak hooded tight. She didn't look back to see if Eliana followed. She could feel her presence, steady and reluctant, like a tether at her back. At the rear wall of the archives, Lyra crouched by the narrow service door. The iron latch still bore the memory of her pick from earlier, loose under her hand. She slipped the wire into place, gave it a twist. Click. The bolt slid free. She glanced up, grinning. Told you it was simple. Eliana's eyes were sharp in the moonlight. Nothing about this is simple. Still, she helped pull the door open just enough for them to slip inside. Cold, stale air rushed over them, carrying the dry scent of ink and parchment. The archives loomed vast and shadowed, shelves stretching like dark battlements into the gloom. Dust stirred around their boots as the door closed behind them with the faintest thud. Eliana's whisper was tight. We find it, we look, and we leave. No games. Lyra's smile was quick and sly. Agreed. No games. But her pulse thundered in her ears as she led the way down the aisles, past treaties and ledgers, past histories and laws, straight toward the spiral end cap where the seam waited, where the drawer slept with its secret. Tonight, it would wake. The shelves swallowed them, towering shadows blotting out the moonlight. Each step stirred motes of dust that glittered faintly before falling back into silence. Lyra's pace was quick, her eyes fixed on the spiral end cap ahead. She could almost feel the seam beneath her fingers, the faint click of the drawer answering her. Behind her, Eliana slowed. "Lyra," she whispered. Lyra turned, annoyed. "What?" "This is wrong." Eliana's voice was low but sharp. "We're apprentices, not thieves. If the council locked this away, there's a reason. We should—" "Ask Melorian," Lyra hissed back. "Beg for scraps while they bury the truth?" "We've tried their way. Look where it's gotten us." Eliana's jaw tightened, her hand drifting toward the hilt of her practice blade out of habit. "You don't know what's in that drawer." It could be dangerous. Lyra's smile was quick, mocking. Then all the more reason to know before it bites us. A sound cut between them. The faint scrape of boots on stone. Both froze, pressed tight against the shelves. A lantern glow bobbed at the far end of the aisle. A guard muttering to himself as he made his round. The light swung closer, shadows stretching long across the shelves. Lyra's pulse hammered. She grabbed Eliana's wrist and pulled her down into a crouch. They pressed into the narrow gap between cases, the dust choking as they held their breath. The guard's lantern flared past, the beam sliding over the wood inches from their faces. Lyra felt Eliana tense beside her, ready to bolt, but she squeezed her wrist hard. "Wait." The footsteps passed, the light dimmed, silence returned. Lyra let go, grinning as she straightened. "See? Not so hard." Eliana glared, her whisper sharp as a blade. "This isn't a game." "No," Lyra said softly, eyes glittering in the dark. "It's truth. And it's right there." She pointed toward the spiral end cap. The drawer slid open with a soft sigh, the ward's sting fading as Lyra pressed the seam. Inside lay a single leather case, its edges cracked, the seal dulled with centuries of dust. Lyra snatched it free before Eliana could argue, her fingers trembling as she unrolled the brittle parchment. The ink was faded but legible, the script tight and formal. Eliana leaned in, her voice barely above a whisper as she traced the curling runes with her eyes. This is Guardian record-keeping, centuries old." "Read it," Lyra urged. Eliana swallowed and began, her voice steady despite the words. "Those who name themselves Emberborn, once kin of Alfheim, dwell apart in the realm of Thandros. They scorn the balance, scorning restraint as weakness. Their creed is fire, to ignite change, to intervene where others would stand idle. Their arts are perilous, their works infused with flame both physical and spiritual. Their writings speak of will replacing law, of action over neutrality. Left unchecked, they will destabilize not only Thandros but all realms bound by its ley lines. Lyra's pulse thundered in her ears. She could almost hear Therion's cane ticking, feel his eyes boring into her, warning her away. Aeliana's voice faltered as she reached the final passage. The portal to Thandros must be sealed. Better still, destroyed. Let no road remain by which their creed may return to Alfheim. This record is to be sealed under council authority. Access restricted. At the bottom, scratched bold and unmistakable, was the signature. Guardian Thandor Elendor. Aeliana's breath caught. Thandor? Her eyes flicked to Lyra, wide, disbelieving. The chairman. Lyra's grin was sharp, triumphant. Not just the chairman. The man sitting at the top of it all. The one everyone swears by. He knew. He buried it. Aeliana shook her head, the words tumbling out before she could stop them. No, he was only a guardian then. He couldn't have... He could, Lyra cut in. He did. And now he sits in judgment of us, pretending balance is holy while his hands still stink of ash. The scroll trembled between them, brittle and damning. For the first time, Aeliana didn't reach to close it. The scroll trembled between them, the damning signature burning at the bottom like a brand. Lyra's grin was still sharp when Aeliana whispered, broken and unsure. The chairman. A sound split the silence. Thump! The crack of a cane striking stone sharp and deliberate. Both girls froze, heads snapping toward the aisle behind them. Lantern light flared, throwing, long shadows across the shelves. Therion stood there, cane planted hard against the floor, his face etched in disapproval. And just behind him, silent as the grave, Maelorian stepped into the light. His eyes flicked from the open drawer to the unrolled scroll to the two apprentices caught in the act. He said nothing. He didn't have to. Chapter 5. Shadows in the Council. The silence stretched like a blade. Therion's cane thudded once more against the stone, the sound loud in the hollow aisles. Lyra and Aeliana stood frozen, the scroll still unfurled between them. "Do you have any idea?" Therion hissed, voice low and sharp. "What danger you've just dragged onto yourselves?" Lyra opened her mouth to snap back, but Maelorian raised a hand. His gaze lingered on the signature at the bottom of the parchment. His face, usually unreadable, was tight with something darker. "They've seen it," he said at last. His voice was calm but weighted. "There's no undoing that." Aeliana stepped forward, trembling. "Master, please, we weren't trying to—" "You were trying to find the truth." Maelorian cut her off. His eyes lifted to hers, steady and unblinking. "The very same thing we are doing." Lyra blinked, thrown. "We?" Therion's jaw clenched, but he gave the faintest nod. "This scroll, the one you stumbled into, it isn't the only one. The Emberborn, the Exodus, none of it vanished. Records were hidden, buried, sealed by order of the Council itself. And the man who signed that order," Maelorian said softly, "now sits as chairman." Aeliana's breath hitched. "You mean?" "Yes," Maelorian finished. "Thandor, Elendor. Then, a guardian. Now, the one who rules over us all." Lyra's pulse hammered. She should have felt triumph. Proof the Council was rotten, proof she'd been right all along. But the way Maelorian's words echoed in the dust made her skin crawl. "So what now?" she asked, voice sharper than she meant. "You cover it up again?" "No." Maelorian's eyes glinted in the lantern light. "We dig deeper." Quietly. Because if the chairman has already buried one realm, then the mole we hunt may not be working against him. Therion leaned on his cane, eyes narrowing. The mole may be him. The silence cracked with the thump of Therion's cane. Lantern light caught the dust, casting Maelorian's shadow long across the shelves. Lyra's knuckles tightened on the brittle scroll. Aeliana bowed her head, trembling. Maelorian's voice cut through, calm but hard. "Close it. Now." Reluctantly, Lyra rolled the parchment, her pulse hammering. She expected a summons to the council chamber, a public stripping of whatever honour they had left. Instead, Maelorion turned to Therion. "My chamber. No ears but ours." Therion gave a curt nod. Single, solemn nod. "So be it." The walk was silent. Maelorion led them through winding halls, past cold statues and shuttered windows, until they reached a heavy oaken door inlaid with wards. He pressed his hand to the sigils. The runes flared, then faded, the lock groaning open. The chamber beyond was plain but guarded by wards on every wall, a place for secrets, not ceremony. A single brazier burned low in the corner, filling the air with smoke and shadow. "Sit," Maelorion ordered. Lyra dropped into a chair with her usual smirk. Aeliana lowered herself carefully, still shaken. Therion remained standing, cane planted like a sentinel. When the door sealed, Maelorion turned, his gaze hard as steel. "You will tell me everything. You entered the sealed archive of Thandros, an archive no guardian has touched since the fall. What did you see?" Aeliana's voice came first, steady but soft. The archive was intact, scrolls upon scrolls, untouched. The Emberborn's own records. We unrolled two. One declaring their creed, rejecting balance, claiming action was duty. Another spoke of betrayal. One among the Guardians serves knowingly. It confirmed there was a mole. Maelorion's expression darkened, but he only nodded. "Go on." Lyra leaned forward, fire flashing in her eyes. "It wasn't just scrolls." We weren't alone in there. Therion's cane tapped sharply. "Speak plainly." "There are survivors," Lyra said, her voice low and fierce. "Elves, Emberborn, still living in Thandros." Aeliana nodded, backing her. "They endure, diminished but unbroken. They have not abandoned their creed." For the first time, Maelorion's composure cracked. "That is impossible." The realm was sealed. Nothing could have survived. Lyra's grin sharpened. "Then you don't know them as well as you think." Aeliana hesitated, then spoke the words that made Maelorion stiffen. "They follow one they call the Mother of Balance. She leads them still." The chamber went deathly quiet. The brazier hissed, its smoke curling like a question. Maelorion's voice was rough, barely a whisper. "The Mother of Balance lives?" "Yes," Aeliana said. "We met her." Therion's cane thudded once against the stone, the sound echoing like judgment. "Then the council's lies run deeper than we feared." Maelorion's gaze lingered on the two young elves across the table, sharp and unyielding. "You realize what you've done. By speaking this aloud, you've bound yourselves to it. The Emberborn are not ash. Their leader lives. And now we must decide whether to hide that truth or burn the council with it." The chamber was heavy with silence, the brazier's smoke curling like a shroud. Lyra leaned back in her chair, eyes glinting, while Aeliana sat rigid, every muscle tight. Maelorion hadn't moved for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Finally, he drew in a deep breath and let it out slow. "If what you say is true," his gaze cut from Lyra to Aeliana, sharp as any blade, "then words are not enough." Therion shifted, his cane ticking once against the stone. "You're thinking—" "I need to see it with my own eyes," Maelorion said, his voice quiet but final. "The survivors. The Mother of Balance. The truth the council buried." His hand closed into a fist behind his back. "We go back to Thandros." The brazier hissed, sparks leaping like embers into the dark. Chapter 6, The Path Back. The chamber was warded, sealed against ears and eyes. Shadows swayed on the walls cast by the low-burning brazier as Maelorian stood at the head of the table. "There is only one way into Thandros," he said, his voice flat with certainty. "The portal Ronan reawakened at the outpost. The Council knows of it, though Elendor insists on keeping it off the ledgers. And since its rediscovery, a detachment has been stationed there." Therion leaned on his cane, brows furrowed. "A guard detail. How many?" "A full squad," Maelorian answered. "Veterans. Loyal. They won't allow passage without direct sanction. Not mine, not yours." His gaze flicked between them. "If they see us, they'll report straight to the chairman." Aeliana shifted in her seat, her hands tightening in her lap. "They're only doing their duty. To deceive them." "Is the only way forward," Lyra cut in. She leaned back, a grin tugging at her lips. "We can't ask permission. If the chairman's name is written on the Emberborn's death warrant, he'll never let us through. So we don't ask, we slip." Therion gave a sharp nod. "The girl is right. We can't brute force our way past trained wardens. We need misdirection. Watch patterns, rotations, weak spots." Maelorian's eyes narrowed. "I won't sanction killing our own to reach the truth." "Subterfuge only," Lyra smirked. "Good thing I'm better at slipping than stabbing, though I'll do either if it comes to it." Aeliana turned on her, voice tight. "These are elves sworn to protect us. They're not enemies." "No," Lyra replied, her tone softening but not yielding. "But they'll become obstacles the second they see us at that frame." "Do you really think Elendor doesn't have them reporting every breath that crosses that threshold?" The words hung heavy. Therion finally broke the silence. "Then it's settled. We leave under cover of night, approach the outpost unseen. We'll watch the guard's rhythm, find the blind hour, and take it." His cane tapped the stone, sharp as a gavel. Maelorian studied the three of them, his expression unreadable. "If we succeed, we reach Thandros. If we fail, Elendor will know exactly who defied him. Understand this. There will be no hiding from his wrath if we're caught." Lyra leaned forward, fire flashing in her eyes. "Then we don't get caught." Aeliana exhaled slowly, her shoulders rigid. "Balance preserve us." Maelorian's hand closed into a fist. "Prepare yourselves. Tomorrow night, we move." The brazier hissed as if in answer, sparks leaping into the shadows like embers scattered on the wind. The meeting broke at last, Maelorian dismissing them with a grim nod. Therion lingered by the brazier, the steady tick of his cane following them out into the hall. Lyra's blood was still humming when she slipped away from the dormitory path. The weapons master's rack stood silent in the torchlight, the yard empty for the night. She knew which chest held the paired blades, slim and balanced, meant for speed instead of show. Her fingers closed around them, one in each hand. The weight felt right, not heavy like the bow, not distant like a spear. These were weapons for closeness, for honesty, for her. She twirled them once, grinning to herself before sliding them under her cloak. Not borrowed anymore, hers. Aeliana, meanwhile, moved quietly through the storerooms. She filled a pack with food, cloth, and sealed water skins, provisions enough to ease weary hands. She added medicine, salves, even a bundle of simple tools. Her hands trembled as she tied it closed. "They will need to see we come not only with questions," she whispered, "but with care." For the Emberborn survivors, trust would be hard won. She meant to bring something more than steel. When Lyra returned, blades hidden and eyes alight, she found Aeliana waiting with the pack at her feet. Lyra smirked. "Daggers and duty. Looks like we're both ready." Aeliana didn't smile, but her gaze was steady. "Then balance guide us. Tomorrow, Thandros." The brazier's embers hissed low as though echoing the name, and the night swallowed their oath. Chapter 7. The Outpost. The night was cold and sharp, the kind that carried sound too far. Lyra crouched in the tree line, her cloak drawn tight, eyes fixed on the ruin of stone and iron that loomed ahead. The outpost had once been nothing more than a forgotten shell, half swallowed by ivy and rot. Now it lived again, rebuilt in pieces, lanterns burning at the gate and along the ramparts. At its heart rose the ancient frame Ronan had reawakened, the Thandros portal, its carved sigils glimmering faintly even in dormancy. And around it a dozen guards. They paced in twos, armour gleaming pale under torchlight. Two more stood fixed at the base of the portal itself, spears crossed over their shoulders. They were disciplined, veterans who'd seen enough of the world to expect trouble even when none was meant to come. "They've tightened the watch since last I was here," Melorian murmured. His hand rested lightly on the hilt of his dagger, but his voice carried the weight of command. "We won't pass without a plan." Therion leaned on his cane, eyes scanning the walls. 2 always on the portal. 4 on the walls. 6 patrolling the yard. Tight rotation. Every 3 minutes they change direction. He tapped the cane once against the root beside him. "We slip when the yard thins, but we must be ghosts. If even one sounds alarm, Elendor will know by dawn." Lyra's lips curved into a grin. "Ghosts I can do." Aeliana shot her a look, sharp and pained. "These aren't enemies, Lyra. They're our kin. We should talk to them. If Melorian vouches—" "No," Melorian cut in, voice low. "They would obey their orders before me." "Too much loyalty, not enough questions, and I will not risk their lives by placing them in the middle of this." Lyra smirked. "So we sneak." "Or we deceive," Therion countered, his tone sharper. "Not every guard's eyes need to see the truth. A distraction, a feint, enough to turn their heads while we step through." The brazier of the outpost hissed faintly in the distance, as if mocking their debate. They moved when the moon slid behind a bank of clouds. Lyra darted first, her form low to the ground, slipping from tree to stone, shadow to shadow. Her twin daggers rested against her thighs, comfort more than weapon. She didn't need to use them, not unless it went wrong. Aeliana followed reluctantly, her pack heavy with supplies. She whispered a prayer under her breath, though she wasn't sure if she wanted the balance to hear it. Therion was slower but precise, his cane striking only where roots muffled the sound. Melorian brought up the rear, every line of his body coiled but controlled. They reached the outer wall. Lyra pressed herself against the stone, listening. The cadence of boots thudded above, fading as 2 guards moved to the far side. She caught Melorian's eye and gave a sharp nod. "Now." They slipped through the ruined corner where ivy concealed a breach. Inside the yard, the patrol looped wide. For one heartbeat, the space was open. Then a shout cracked the air. Lyra froze, hand on her dagger, but the shout wasn't for them. One of the guards was cursing at another, laughing as they tossed a dice cup by the gate. The sound rang across the yard, pulling the attention of 2 more. "Fortune smiles," Therion muttered. They moved, quick and silent, across the yard toward the portal. But the 2 stationed at its base never left. Their spears gleamed as they shifted stance, eyes sharp. "Leave it to me," Lyra whispered. She slid from the group before Aeliana could stop her. She emerged from shadow just far enough to toss a pebble against the far wall. The clatter drew both guards' heads a fraction to the side. Not much, but enough. Melorian moved first, swift and silent, his cloak sweeping as he pressed a hand to the portal's sigils. Ancient runes flared, the frame groaning as light kindled within its stone. The air shimmered, a low hum filling the outpost. One guard turned back, eyes widening. "The portal—" Lyra was there, stepping into his path, her grin wicked. "Careful. Shadows play tricks at night." Melorian's voice cut through, sharp and final. "Through. Now." Therion shoved Aeliana forward. She hesitated only once, her eyes locking with the startled guards, before she vanished into the light. Lyra followed with a wink, her form swallowed in the hum. Therion next, cane striking sparks as he stepped through. Melorian lingered a heartbeat, meeting the guard's stunned eyes. "Tell no one what you saw," he said, his voice like stone. Then he stepped into the shimmer, and the portal roared shut behind them. The outpost yard erupted in shouts, but too late. On the other side, ash-scented air filled their lungs. Red embers drifted on the wind, carrying the weight of a realm scarred but unbroken. They were in Thandros. Chapter 8. The Sealed Truth. The air of Thandros was heavy with ash, the sky a dull crimson smoulder. The portal snapped closed behind them, leaving only silence and the distant groan of a ruined city. Maelorian inhaled once sharply. The guards will have sent word the moment the frame lit. Elendor will know. His hounds will not be far. His eye burned with urgency as he turned to Lyra and Eliana. "You've walked here before. Take me to the archive, now." Lyra grinned despite the ash stinging her throat. "Was hoping you'd say that." Eliana adjusted the pack on her shoulders, her voice taut. "This way. But stay close. The city itself is forbidden ground." They moved quickly, their steps echoing faintly off broken stone. The ruins of Thandros loomed around them, scorched towers leaning like blackened teeth. Avenues split by cracks that still glowed faintly with ember heat. Statues half melted, their faces eroded into weeping masks. No voices, no life, only the weight of absence. The survivors hadn't returned here. They wouldn't dare. At last, Eliana led them down a side street choked with rubble and creeping ivy. At its end stood a sealed archway, half buried in ash, the jagged flame sigil carved deep above the lintel. Lyra brushed her fingers across it, the grooves rough against her skin. "Here." Just like we left it. Maelorian stepped forward, his palm pressing against the stone. The air prickled, wards shivering awake before sighing into nothing, recognizing him as guardian. The archway groaned, stone grinding as the hidden door cracked open. Cold air rushed out, heavy with the scent of dust and old parchment. Inside, the archive waited. Rows of shelves stretched into darkness, scrolls stacked in careful order, untouched since the fall. Dust lay thick, disturbed only where Lyra and Eliana had walked before. The jagged flame sigil marked the ends of every row. Maelorian's face was grim, but his voice carried quiet awe. Centuries sealed, and yet whole. Therion's cane clicked softly against the stone floor as he entered, his eyes sharp. And if Elendor feared these words enough to bury them, then they are worth more than any gold in Alfheim. Lyra smirked, pulling one of her daggers free, the flame of a nearby torch reflected on its edge. "Then let's see how deep the lies go before his hounds catch up." The archive's air was heavy, thick with dust and silence. The shelves loomed on all sides, each row branded with the jagged flame sigil, each scroll waiting like a voice long strangled. Maelorian's gaze swept across it, sharp and calculating. "There's too much here. We cannot take it all, but what we can find may yet break Elendor's hold." Therion tapped his cane once, eyes narrowing at the rows. "Then we search. Quickly." Maelorian nodded. "You and Lyra. Catalogue what you can. Look for references to the mole, to the council, to Elendor. Anything that ties their creed to Alfheim." Lyra's grin flashed. "About time someone gave me free rein in a library." She slipped into the stacks, dagger tapping lightly against her thigh as her other hand trailed the dust. "Let's see what secrets you've got, Emberborn." Therion followed, his cane ticking steady, already pulling scrolls from the lower rows with meticulous care. Maelorion turned then, his eyes settling on Eliana. "You said there were survivors?" Her breath caught, but she nodded. "Yes, they do not dwell here. The city is forbidden to them. Their village lies beyond, in the Ashwood Valley." "Take me to them," Maelorian said. His tone left no room for doubt. Eliana hesitated, torn. "If we're seen—" "Then so be it," he cut in. "Scrolls are words. Survivors are proof. If they live under this, Mother of Balance, then I must see her with my own eyes. Only then will I know the weight of what Elendor tried to bury. The brazier's flame guttered as if in agreement. Eliana shouldered her pack, her supplies clinking softly within. She looked once toward Lyra, who was already vanishing into the dust, and then back to Maelorian. "Very well," she said. Her voice was steady, though her heart pounded. "I'll take you." Maelorian inclined his head. "Good. Then let's move, before the Council's shadow finds us." Together they turned toward the ruined archway, leaving Therion and Lyra to the silence of the archive. The dust closed around them, secrets whispering on every shelf. Chapter 9. The Ashwood Path. The ruins fell away behind them, the scorched stones swallowed by pale trees. The Ashwood Valley stretched ahead, its trunks bleached and brittle, its canopy casting shadows like ribs across the trail. Maelorian walked at Eliana's side, his silence heavy, his eyes sharp on every shifting branch. They had not gone far before movement stirred in the trees. A half-circle of figures emerged onto the trail, ember-born guards, cloaked in soot-black and ember-red, their helms marked with the jagged flame. Their spears were lowered but not levelled. They were a warning, not a threat. At their head walked a woman tall and grave, her silver-white hair braided with threads of crimson, her bearing regal but unadorned. The Mother of Balance. Eliana dropped into a bow at once. "Mother." The woman's gaze softened, though her eyes carried the weight of centuries. "Child of Alfheim, you return." Her eyes flicked to Maelorion, narrowing slightly. "And this time, you do not walk alone." Maelorion met her gaze evenly. "I am Maelorion, guardian of the Council. I come to see what Elendor has buried, the truth of Thandros, with my own eyes." The mother studied him for a long moment. Her guards shifted, waiting on her word. Then she raised a hand. The spears lifted. "You carry the weight of oaths," she said, her tone unreadable. "Whether they serve you or bind you remains to be seen." Her eyes returned to Eliana, softening again. "And the wanderer you once asked after, Ronan. He has moved on. His path lies beyond these ashes. He will not return here." Eliana's breath caught, her shoulders easing with relief. The mother inclined her head toward the valley beyond. "Come. The village waits. If you seek the truth, you will find it there, though not all truths are kind." The Emberborn guards closed around them, not as captors but as escorts. Together they moved deeper into the Ashwood, where the last heartbeat of Thandros still endured. Far behind, in the forbidden city's heart, dust still stirred in the sealed archive. Lyra perched on the edge of a shelf, her daggers sheathed at her hips, torchlight gleaming in her eyes as she unrolled another brittle scroll. The jagged flame sigil marked the edges, the ink inside faded but sharp enough to cut. Therion's cane tapped as he prowled the rows, pulling cases down with grim patience. "This is no guardian vault," he muttered. "Every word here is theirs, pure, undiluted. No council scribe's hand, no edits." Lyra grinned. "Makes it more fun, doesn't it? Secrets the council couldn't touch." He shot her a sharp look. "Fun? Girl, this is fire soaked in ink. Handle it poorly and it burns more than fingers." She unrolled further, eyes scanning. "This one's not philosophy. It's records, lists of names, lineages, families." They kept everything. Her voice dropped as she ran a finger down the page. They were building more than a creed. They were building a nation. Therion eased another scroll open, his expression hardening as he read. And the council sought to erase it. No wonder Elendor ordered the portal destroyed. The air grew heavy, as if the very shelves listened. Dust curled around them, disturbed by hands that had no right to be there. Lyra leaned back, smirking despite the weight in her chest. Guess the Guardians weren't the only ones writing history. They just made sure theirs was the only story told. Therion rolled the scroll carefully, his jaw tight. Not anymore. Not if we walk out of here alive. Outside, the ashwood whispered as the Mother of Balance led Aeliana and Mylorion closer to the glow of firelight, where the village of the Emberborn waited. Therion's hands trembled slightly as he eased the next scroll open, the dust coughing off it in clouds. He read in silence for a long time before his face went hard. "Girl," he said at last, his voice like stone, "come see this." Lyra slid off her perch, leaning over the parchment. The Emberborn script curled in sharp lines, but the translation was clear enough. Met again with Guardian Elendor. He pressed for our philosophies, asked how flame may be bent to will. We gave him words, not weapons. He promised understanding. Lyra's brow furrowed. Elendor. Therion nodded grimly. The same. Before he was chairman. He pointed lower. Another entry, written heavier, the ink pressed hard. Elendor speaks with two tongues. To us he brings promises. To Alfheim he carries our undoing. Days after his visit, the order came. Burn the gates. Seal the road. Bury Thandros in silence. He is one of them, but not ours. Lyra's grin flickered sharp, almost feral. So the great chairman isn't just corrupt. He's a liar, a betrayer. He knew they lived, he saw them, and still he tried to kill them. Therion rolled the scroll tight, his knuckles white around the parchment. If this ever sees council floor, it will bring Elendor to his knees. Lyra twirled her dagger idly, eyes bright in the torchlight. Then let's make sure it does. The shelves loomed around them, silent witnesses to a truth sharp enough to cut realms. Chapter 10. The Village of Ash and Flame. The ashwood thinned as the trail widened, and ahead a glow pulsed warm against the dark. Aeliana's breath caught. Beyond the last line of pale trees, the Emberborn village spread across the valley floor, not ruins but living flame. Homes of blackened timber and stone rose among the ash, their walls painted with the jagged flame sigil. Braziers burned at every corner, not merely for light but for identity. Fire as heartbeat, fire as heritage. The air smelled of smoke and herbs, of lives carved from ruin. Children's voices carried faintly, laughter woven with the clang of forges. The Emberborn endured. The Mother of Balance led them down the slope, her crimson robe gleaming in the firelight. Her guards fanned out, their presence protective but not hostile. When they entered the heart of the village, Emberborn eyes turned, wary, measuring. Some nodded to Aeliana with recognition, but most lingered on Mylorion, suspicion burning bright. Aeliana stepped forward at once, loosening her pack. "We brought supplies," she said softly, lowering the bundle to the ground before the mother. "Food, medicine, cloth. What little we could carry. A gift. In trust." The mother's silver brows lifted faintly. She glanced to her people, then back to Aeliana. "You remember kindness, child. That will not be forgotten." She gestured, and two Emberborn youths came to lift the pack away. The crowd murmured. Not warm, not yet, but softened. Only then did Aeliana turn, her hand indicating the tall figure at her side. "Mother, this is Mylorion of the Council." He came to see the truth of Thandros with his own eyes. "I vouch for him." The mother's gaze fixed on him, long and unblinking, silence stretched. Around them the firelight cracked and hissed. Finally she inclined her head, not bowing, not submitting, but granting recognition. "Mylorion of Alfheim," she said, her voice carrying across the gathered crowd. "You walk among the Emberborn. You carry oaths not ours. Yet you have come, and one of ours speaks for you. That is enough, for now." The crowd eased just slightly, and the mother's eyes softened as she looked back to Aeliana. "Come, we will speak where flame is steady and ears are trusted. She turned, leading them toward the great brazier at the village's heart, where the truth of Thandros still burned. The mother led them into the village, the firelight dancing across faces lined with soot and years. Aeliana walked steady at her side, but Mylorion hung back half a pace, his eyes sweeping the valley. It was not lifeless, not anymore. Birds flitted in the ashwood branches, their wings flashing white against the dark. In the distance, a pair of deer lifted their heads from the brush, ears twitching. Small things, but life undeniable. Mylorion slowed, his brow furrowing. There were none here before. Aeliana's voice was soft. No. When I first came, it was silent. No bird call, no tracks, nothing. The mother heard, her lips curving faintly. It was after her crossing, she said, nodding toward Aeliana. When the guardian child stepped through, the silence broke. First a bird on the wind, then others. The land remembers who walks it, the villagers murmured as they passed, their gazes lingering on Aeliana with something more than suspicion, something close to reverence. She is balance returned, one whispered. No, another murmured back. She is a guardian. We once feared them. But look, the forest breathes again since her coming. Melorian caught it all. His chest tightened. Guardians were hated here, the Emberborn's old enemies. Yet before his eyes they laid their awe at the feet of his own apprentice. For a moment, he could not speak. The mother of balance glanced back at him, as though reading his thoughts. You see it now. Our people feared your kind, and still do. But this one, she gestured gently to Aeliana. She has walked between silence and life. The valley bends to her. So they bend as well. Maelorian's throat worked, but no words came. He had come seeking truth and found it in ash and fire, and in Aeliana, who carried more weight here than he ever had. He looked at her, truly looked, and for the first time wondered if the prophecy-whispered storm was not a burden on him alone. The villagers' murmurs followed them to the great brazier at the centre of the village. Its flame burned steady and high, throwing long shadows against the surrounding huts. Emberborn guards took their places at the edges, silent and watchful, while the rest of the people drifted back to their work. Only a few remained, seated near the fire, their eyes never leaving Mylorion and Aeliana. The mother gestured for them to sit on the low stone benches beside the brazier. She remained standing, her crimson robe catching the firelight, her presence both solemn and commanding. You've brought gifts, she said, inclining her head toward Aeliana. And you've brought questions. Her gaze flicked to Maelorion. But questions are never free. So speak plainly. What truth do you seek from Thandros? Maelorion sat stiffly, his hand resting on his knee, every instinct warning him he was a stranger here. The truth the council buried, he said. We were told Thandros fell, that none remained, that silence had claimed this place. His jaw tightened. Yet here you endure. The mother's silver eyes caught the firelight, gleaming. We endured because we would not bow. The balance was a chain we refused, and so they tried to cut us from the world. She turned to Aeliana, her voice softening. And yet you came. Twice now. You walk as guardian, but you brought no chains. You brought food, healing. You brought life back to the ash. Aeliana lowered her eyes, uncomfortable under the weight of such expectation. I didn't mean to. I only thought it was right. That is why they listen when your name is spoken, the mother said. Because you did not mean to. Balance works strongest through those who do not claim it. She let the words hang in the air before turning back to Maelorion. But you, guardian, you come with purpose. Do you seek judgment? Do you seek alliance? Or do you seek to weigh us again in your council's scales? Maelorion met her gaze without flinching. I seek proof that Thandros still breathes, that the Emberborn live, that Elendor lied when he sealed your fate. I seek the truth, not to bury it, but to use it. The mother's expression did not change, but the fire popped sharply, embers scattering into the night. At last, she nodded once, her voice low. Then, you will have it. But truth cuts both ways, Guardian. If you carry it back across the portal, it will not only burn Elendor, it may burn you as well. She stepped back, lifting her hand toward the brazier. Come at dawn. You will see what remains of Thandros with your own eyes. The flame roared suddenly higher, painting their faces in searing light. Chapter 11. The Scroll of 10. Dust swirled as Therion lowered another brittle case onto the table. His hands, steady despite the years, eased it open. The parchment inside cracked at the edges, but the ink held, sharp, deliberate strokes meant to endure. He read in silence at first, then his brow furrowed, his cane tapping a slow rhythm against the stone floor. Lyra glanced up from her own stack. What is it now? Another sermon on fire and freedom? No, Therion murmured. His eyes narrowed, scanning the lines again. This one is different. A ledger. Lyra slid off her perch, crossing to his side. Ledger of what? He turned the scroll so she could see. Names marched down the page in Emberborn script, but even Lyra recognized the cadence of Alfheim titles. 10, Therion said, all from Alfheim. Some merchants, some scholars, and here, his finger stabbed at the parchment, guardians. Lyra leaned in, squinting at the curling lines. Who are they? Therion's cane tapped slow against the stone as his eyes moved down the page. Men and women of Alfheim. Some I knew by reputation. A few I knew in person. He read each name again, lips tightening. Calith Vera, he murmured. Died in a fire, they said. Vylia Dawn. Cut down in a duel. Selira Thane. Fever. He shook his head. Too many. Too neat. Lyra's brow furrowed. You're saying... They're all dead, girl. His voice was grim, carrying the weight of memory. 9 of these names vanished from Alfheim's story, each swallowed by misfortune. One by one. Over the years, all but one. Lyra's eyes followed his finger to the last name. The ink was clear, bold, as though written with emphasis. Elendor. She froze. The chairman? Therion's jaw clenched. Thandor Elendor. Back then just a guardian on the rise. Of 10 who tied themselves to Thandros, he is the only one who lived long enough to profit, and he sits the council's throne still. Lyra's grin was sharp, but it didn't reach her eyes. So, while his friends ended up in graves, he ended up in power. Therion rolled the scroll, his knuckles white. This is no ledger of allies. It's a death warrant written in slow ink. 9 gone. 1 remains. If the council sees this, it won't just tarnish Elendor. It will burn him. The silence of the archive pressed close around them, the shelves heavy with centuries of betrayal. Therion bound the scroll again with careful fingers, his jaw tight. This cannot leave this room carelessly. Lyra leaned back on the table, smirking. Why not? It's exactly the blade we need. Put it in the right hands, and the mighty chairman comes crashing down. His cane struck the stone sharp and sudden. Think, girl. A blade that sharp cuts both ways. If Elendor learns we found this, he won't wait for politics. He'll send steel in the night. For you, for Aeliana, for me. Lyra's grin faded, though the fire in her eyes did not. So what? Hide it. Let him keep playing king while the truth rots in here? Therion's gaze bore into her, grim and unwavering. We choose our moment. We choose who hears it and when. Not before. Lyra twirled a dagger idly, her smirk returning but edged now with thought. Sounds like you want to keep it under your cane until the council's already bleeding. Therion gave no answer, only slid the scroll into his cloak with a motion precise and final. The archive's silence closed in around them again. Dust whispered from the shelves, as though the Emberborn themselves were listening. Lyra tilted her head, breaking the quiet. You ever wonder, old man, what happened to the mole the Emberborn wrote about? The one who betrayed them? Therion's eyes darkened. I don't wonder. He tapped the cane once. I think we just found his name. Chapter 12. Sunrise in the Ashwood. Dawn came muted, the ember sky paling to grey as the ashwood stirred with morning wind. Aeliana rose first from the small hut they had been given, shouldering her pack. Mylorion was already awake, standing rigid at the threshold, his gaze fixed on the faint smoke curling from the valley below. They're waiting, he said quietly. The Ashwood Valley lay quiet under the grey light of dawn. Mist curled low around the pale trees, and the air smelled faintly of smoke and damp earth. Aeliana walked at Mylorion's side, her steps steady though her stomach churned with unease. He, as always, looked unshaken, but his single eye never stopped scanning the horizon. The Mother of Balance waited where the trail widened into the heart of the Emberborn village. Her guards stood in a half-circle, their spears grounded, their eyes sharp but not hostile. Behind them, the villagers gathered in silence. Children pressed against their mothers, smiths with soot still streaked across their arms, elders leaning on staffs carved with flame sigils. The mother lifted her hand and the crowd parted. You wished for proof, Guardian, she said, her voice carrying in the still air. Now you shall have it. She stepped aside. From the shadows of the huts more Emberborn emerged. Dozens, then scores. Men, women, children. Not warriors, not phantoms, but people. Breathing, enduring, alive. A murmur rippled through the crowd, not directed at Mylorion, but at Aeliana. Whispers passed from lip to lip. The guardian child, the one who brought life back. The balance turns with her. Mylorion stood very still, his jaw tight, his hands clasped behind his back. He had read scrolls of history, decrees of erasure, reports of ruin. None of it had prepared him for the sight of a people the council had sworn were dust. The mother's gaze fixed on him, sharp as any blade. This is what Elendor tried to erase. Not words on parchment, not rumour or heresy. Flesh and blood. Will you carry this truth back with you? Or will you bury it as your council once did? The brazier at the village's centre roared suddenly higher, sparks whirling into the dawn sky. Mylorion did not answer. Not yet. The fire roared higher, sparks spinning into the grey dawn sky. The Emberborn crowd pressed close, their eyes fixed on Mylorion and Aeliana, waiting. Aeliana stepped forward, her voice clear though her heart pounded. Mother, you asked what we will carry back to Alfheim. Let it not be only our words. Come with us. Stand before the council yourself. Let them see with their own eyes that the Emberborn live, that you endured. A murmur rippled through the gathered villagers. Some drew back, suspicion flashing. Others nodded faintly, hope sparking in their eyes. The mother's gaze was steady, her silver hair gleaming in the firelight. You would ask me to walk into the den of those who sought to erase us. Aeliana did not flinch. Yes, because only you can shatter their lies. Mylorion stepped forward then, his voice iron. Aeliana is right. We cannot wait. The chairman already knows we crossed the portal. He will act swiftly, to erase evidence, to silence witnesses, to bury every trace of this place. If you stay, he wins. If you come, you put the council itself on trial. The mother studied him in silence, her eyes sharp as a blade. The brazier's flame hissed, crackling in the stillness. Finally she spoke, her voice low but carrying across the crowd. You ask me to place myself in the hands of my enemies. To walk into their hall, knowing Elendor will call me heretic, traitor, shadow of ash. Her gaze softened as it turned back to Aeliana. And yet, you brought life with you when first you walked our valley. The balance stirs around you. That is no lie. The mother looked between them, then at her people. If I go, it will be dangerous. For me, for you, for all of Thandros. But if I do not, his lie may last another 1,000 years. The crowd murmured louder, voices rising. Fear, hope, defiance. The mother raised her hand and silence fell. She looked back to Melorian and Aeliana, the firelight burning in her eyes. Then it must be now. The trek back through the Ashwood Valley was swift, the Emberborn guards shadowing their mother like flame shadows. Melorion walked in silence, Aeliana at his side, her eyes fixed on the path ahead. The urgency beat in every step. When the ruined city's bones rose before them, the sealed archive's doors groaned open once more. Inside, the air was heavy with dust and the scratch of parchment. Lyra leaned against a shelf, twin daggers glinting at her hips, while Therion stood rigid by the long table, 2 scrolls bound and waiting before him. At the sight of Melorion, Therion's eyes narrowed. He stepped forward, cane striking the stone. We have them. 2 scrolls, one naming the mole, the other tying Elendor himself to Thandros. This is no longer conjecture, Guardian. This is proof. If we waste another breath, the chairman will move first. Melorion's jaw tightened, his gaze flicking from the scrolls to the woman who entered behind him. Aeliana drew a breath, then stepped forward, her voice clear. Mother of Balance, leader of the Emberborn survivors. She comes with us, to stand before the council and speak truth with her own voice. The archive's silence deepened. Lyra's grin faltered as her eyes widened, catching the weight of it. She pushed off the shelf and stalked closer, voice sharp. You're taking her back across? To Alfheim? Aeliana's answer was firm. Yes. For a moment Lyra stood taut, fire flashing in her eyes. Then she nodded once, fierce. Melorion studied them, his apprentices, his burdens, and perhaps his only shield against what was coming. At last, he spoke, voice heavy with decision. Aeliana, Lyra, she is yours to guard. From here until the council floor, her safety is your charge. Fail, and Thandros dies with her. Lyra's daggers flashed as she crossed them over her chest in salute. Aeliana bowed her head, solemn but resolute. The Mother of Balance inclined her head faintly, her gaze unreadable. Then let us see if your council still remembers how to listen to truth. The brazier's flame guttered as if in warning, and the weight of the coming storm pressed close around them all. From among her people, Mother chose 3 guards, veterans clad in ember-forged steel, their eyes steady with quiet resolve. Melorion swept the chamber with his gaze, weighing them all. His voice carried finality. Then it is decided. We go now, to the scar where the portal once stood. The longer we linger, the tighter his noose closes. The group gathered their things in silence, the mother's eyes unreadable as she watched them. Together they stepped out of the archive, the ruins of Thandros looming around them, and made their way through the broken streets of Thandros they went, past scorched towers and statues half melted, until the ruined heart of the city loomed before them. There at the far edge lay the scar, the place where the old portal frame had once stood. Only shattered stone and blackened runes remained, a wound in the earth that had not healed. The mother halted, her crimson robes brushing the ash. Her guards fanned out, wary but silent. Melorion stepped forward, his expression grim. He raised his hand over the rune scar, drawing the lay to the surface. Symbols flared, first faint, then blazing, curling into a circle of light. The air trembled, shuddering until the shimmer tore open. Aeliana steadied the mother with one hand. Lyra grinned like a wolf, her daggers gleaming at her hips. Therion's cane tapped once, anchoring them all in the moment. Through, Melorion said. One by one they stepped into the light. And, when they emerged, an elven war company waited, ranks gleaming, spears grounded as one. At their head, Banners whipped in the wind, and before them all stood the man whose name burned on every scroll they had carried from the dust, Chairman Thandor Elendor. The trap was sprung. The air sealed shut behind them, cutting Thandros away. Chapter 13. The Trap. The shimmer spat them out into blinding daylight. The hiss of closing magic faded into the clatter of steel. A full company of elven soldiers stood in tight formation, their spears grounded as one, banners snapping in the wind. At their head, tall and cold-eyed, stood Chairman Thandor Elendor. His gaze swept the company that had just crossed. Mylurion, Aeliana, Lyra, Therion, the Mother of Balance with her 3 crimson-clad guards. Silence stretched. Mylurion moved first. He stepped forward, cloak shifting around him, his voice steady as stone. Thandor, stand down your company. I am Mylurion, senior of the 3. You forget yourself if you think to level arms against me. His words carried authority that no soldier dared dismiss. The front rank shifted, uneasy, their spear points wavering ever so slightly. Behind him, Aeliana's hand went to her pack, her stance sliding subtly between the mother and the soldiers. Lyra mirrored her on the other side, daggers already loose, her grin more a snarl than a smile. The Emberborn guards moved in sync, shields lifted, a crimson wall braced around their leader. The Mother of Balance said nothing, her silver gaze fixed on Elendor, calm as flame held in the hand. The air was thick, every heartbeat stretched taut. One word from Elendor, and it would break into blood. Mylurion stepped forward, cloak sweeping, his voice steady, but iron-hard. I am one of the 3, Elendor. I sit at your side, sworn to advise and to guard the balance. And as counsellor, I tell you this. The balance has been broken. Proof lies in our hands. And in hers, he gestured to the Mother of Balance, crimson against the pale morning. Elendor's smile was thin, sharp as a blade. And you think to lecture me? You, who serve at my pleasure? You forget yourself, Mylurion. It is the chairman's voice that carries law, not the whispers of old advisers. Mylurion's single eye blazed. Then let the full council judge. Bring these scrolls, bring her testimony. If your name is clean, let every guardian hear it. The soldiers shifted, murmurs rippling through the ranks. They had trained to obey without question, but even they could feel the ground shifting beneath their feet. Elendor's mask slipped for the barest heartbeat, his eyes hardened, venom flashing. You tread close to treason, counsellor. To set heretics in judgment over me? To wave ash-stained parchment before soldiers as if it were law? Lyra stepped forward, daggers gleaming, her grin wolfish. Looks to me like he's afraid of paper cuts. The Emberborn guards braced shields before the mother, their spears angled toward the ring of elven steel. Aeliana moved in sync with them, one hand steadying the mother, the other on her dagger, her breath tight, but her stance unyielding. The air trembled on the edge of blood. Elendor lifted his hand, and the soldiers snapped back to stillness. His smile returned thinner, colder. Very well. If you crave a hearing, counsellor, you shall have one. But you will walk there under guard, and you will remember whose hall you stand in. The company shifted formation, encircling them in steel. The Mother of Balance lifted her chin, calm as flame in the wind. Then let it be done. Let every guardian hear the truth, not whispers, not rumours, but fire spoken in the open. Elendor's eyes flicked over her, his smile never touching them. So be it. Let us see which truth survives the council's flaw. The order was given, and the company shifted formation. A wall of shields closed around them, spears angled outward, as though to herd them like quarry. On foot, Elendor said smoothly, his smile as sharp as any blade. Let all Alfheim see what balance looks like when it walks in chains. No chains were given, but none were needed. The soldiers' ring was iron enough. They began the march. The first hours passed in silence, broken only by the rhythm of boots on stone paths and the rustle of banners in the wind. Villages turned out to watch as the column passed. 11 farmers, merchants, children. They stared wide-eyed at the crimson-robed figure of the Mother of Balance and at the small company walking with her, whispers trailing in their wake. Lyra kept close to the mother's side, her hands never far from her daggers, eyes darting to every shadow and rooftop. She leaned toward Ileana at one point, muttering low, "Look at them stare. Half of them think we're traitors, the other half think we're legends. Either way, I'd rather have steel in my hand than silence in my ears." Ileana shushed her softly, but her own face was pale. She could feel the weight of every gaze, the sharp sting of her people seeing her walk in a prisoner's ring. Therion trudged with steady steps, his cane striking in rhythm. His expression was unreadable, but his voice rasped low when he caught Mylorian's eye. "This is no march to justice. It is theatre. He parades us to poison the ground before we ever step into the chamber." "I know," Mylorian said quietly, his gaze fixed on the horizon. "But even theatre can turn. When the people see her," he nodded faintly toward the mother, who walked calm as a flame held steady, "they will see truth that cannot be buried, not by him, not by me, not by any council." The Emberborn guards walked like crimson shadows, their shields close, their eyes wary of every spear point around them. One, younger than the others, spat into the dust and muttered, "This is no guard. This is an insult." The Mother of Balance reached out and touched his shoulder lightly. Her voice was soft but unyielding. "Peace. Fire burns brighter when it waits." Even Lyra blinked at that, her grin slipping for just a heartbeat. The column wound on, the sun climbing higher. Every village they passed sent more whispers into the air until the words themselves seemed to march with them. Guardian, heretic, traitor, survivor, balance. The march ended at twilight, the banners of the council tower rising above them in dark silhouette. Lanterns glowed along its walls, but the great doors were sealed. "The council is adjourned for the night," Elendor said smoothly, as the soldiers drew them into the courtyard. "They will hear nothing until tomorrow." His gaze lingered on the Mother of Balance, like a hawk eyeing prey. "In the meantime, our guests will be secured." Two captains stepped forward, bowing sharply. "Orders, Chairman." "Take them to quarters," Elendor said. His smile was thin. "And see that they are not disturbed." His eyes flicked to Mylorian. "All of them." The tension shifted like a bowstring. Mylorian stepped forward, his single eye blazing. "No. You may sequester witnesses. You may even guard heretics." His hand clenched at his side. "But by council law, you may not confine one of the three, nor one appointed to advise them. Try it, and it is you who breaks oath." The courtyard went silent. The captains froze, glancing between the two men. Elendor's smile did not falter, but his teeth showed faintly. "Very well," he said softly. "Mylorian, you and your shadow may walk free. For now." Therion's cane tapped once on the stone as he stepped forward, sharp and unbent. "Your generosity overwhelms me." Elendor's gaze returned to the Mother of Balance, but she, and those who walk with her, will remain in guarded quarters until the council sits. At once Ileana spoke, her voice clear. "Then we remain as well." Lyra stepped forward beside her, daggers at her hips, her grin sharp. "We swore to guard her. If she stays, we stay." Elendor studied them, the soldiers bristling at his back, the law at his throat. Finally, he inclined his head a fraction, the smile never touching his eyes. "So be it. Guards, see them placed. Together." The company shifted. The Mother of Balance raised her chin, calm even as spears closed around her. Mylorian leaned close to Ileana as they were parted. "Hold fast. Dawn comes quickly." Aliena bowed her head once. Lyra only smirked. The soldiers led them into the depths of the council tower, the great doors shutting behind them with a hollow boom. Chapter 14. Shadows Before Dawn. The corridors of the council tower were quiet but not still. Melorian could feel it in the air, the hum of movement just beyond hearing, the shuffle of boots where none should be. He walked with Therion at his side, both free of the guard's ring but not free of eyes. Everywhere they passed, soldiers stiffened, masks of discipline stretched over unease. "He won't wait until the chamber," Therion muttered, his cane tapping slow against the stone. "Elendor will strike tonight, in silence, where law cannot see him." Melorian's eyes narrowed. "I know." They moved into a small antechamber lit by a single brazier, the flames guttering as if uneasy with the air itself. Therion turned, his voice low and sharp. "And what of the women?" "He'll come for them first, easier targets, locked away with only a handful of guards between them and his knives." For the first time all night, a faint smile tugged at Melorian's mouth, grim but real. "Then I feel for the fool who tries to enter that chamber uninvited." Therion blinked, then huffed a short, humorless laugh. "Aye, daggers in the dark won't find easy sleep with those two standing watch." The brazier cracked, sparks leaping into the air. Both men turned back toward the hall, their shoulders straightening. "Still," Melorian said, his tone hardening again, "we cannot leave it to them alone." Elendor has played this game for centuries. He knows every shadow, every turn of the knife. Tonight, we match him, move for move, or dawn may never come. Therion's cane struck the stone once like a gavel. Then let's see how sharp the old wolf's teeth still are. Melorian paced the small antechamber, firelight flickering against the stone. He stopped at the writing desk, pulled a sheet of parchment free, and began to write in a hand quick and sure. Therion watched, leaning on his cane. "And who are you calling at this hour?" "Every elf in this tower answers to Elendor." "Not every elf," Melorian murmured. He finished the lines, sealed them with wax from the brazier, and pressed his own signet into it. He held the message for a long moment before speaking. "There is one I have trusted since he first drew breath, a ranger of the Ashenwood. I watched him grow, and I know his oath better than I know my own. If he comes, he will bring men who serve not Elendor, but the realm itself." Therion's brows rose. "And if Elendor sees him slip inside with soldiers at his back?" "Then he will know," Melorian said, his voice low and grim, "that the game has changed." He crossed the chamber, handed the sealed letter to a waiting page. His gaze sharpened as he leaned close. "Find him. Deliver this to his hand only. Run as if the balance itself chases you. No delay, no detour. Fly." The page, pale but determined, bowed and bolted into the corridor, vanishing into the tower's shadows. Melorian watched him go, then turned back to Therion. His eyes gleamed in the brazier's light, hard with resolve. "If Elendor strikes tonight, he will not find us alone." Therion's cane struck once against the stone, a spark of approval in his eyes. "Then let's make ready. If the chairman dares send knives in the dark, we'll answer them with steel in the light." The deep hour came when even the tower's stones seemed to sleep. The lanterns outside the chamber guttered low, their light pooling across the cracks beneath the door. Inside, the air was quiet. The Mother of Balance knelt in the centre of the room, her crimson robe spilling like flame around her, her silver hair gleaming faintly in the torchlight. Her eyes were closed, her breath steady, deep in meditation, her presence calm and immovable. Eliana sat across from her, mirroring her posture. Her face was pale with exhaustion, but her breaths matched the mother's, her own spirit reaching for stillness. For a time, the two seemed like reflections, Balance and Ember bound in silence. Near the walls, the three Ember-born guards, stood with shields grounded. Their eyes were sharp, but their shoulders sagged with the wear of the day-long march. One swayed slightly before catching himself, jaw tight with stubbornness. "Rest," Lyra said flatly from her post by the door. She leaned against the stone, arms crossed, her daggers gleaming at her hips. "You've marched enough for one day." "I'll cover down." The eldest of the guards shook his head. "We swore to—" "Swore to keep her alive," Lyra cut in, her grin sharp. "And you won't do that falling asleep on your feet. Close your eyes. I'll hear anyone long before they open that door." The three exchanged glances. Reluctance warred with weariness. And weariness won. One by one, they lowered themselves against the wall, shields close at hand, eyes slipping shut. Lyra stayed where she was, her back to the stone, gaze fixed on the door. Beyond it, heavy boots shifted now and again. Council guards stationed to watch, not allies, not friends. Her hand drifted to the hilt of one dagger. She smirked faintly to herself. "Come on then," she whispered under her breath. "I'm waiting." The room fell still again, only the faint sound of breath and the quiet hum of meditation filling the silence. But Lyra's eyes stayed sharp, unblinking. Midnight belonged to her. The tower's halls were hushed at the deep hour, only the hiss of torches breaking the stillness. Mylorian stood at the brazier, the flame throwing hard lines across his face. Therion leaned nearby, cane resting against his shoulder, his eyes half-lidded. The silence shifted. Not a sound, not yet. Just a pressure, a prickle at the back of the neck. Mylorian felt it before he saw it. His body moved on instinct, cloak sweeping aside as his hand came up. A flicker in the corner, a shadow peeling from shadow, steel whispered free. The assassin lunged, but Mylorian was already there, catching the strike on his forearm bracer, his other hand slamming into the figure's throat. The assassin crumpled with a wet gasp, blade clattering to the floor. Another presence stirred behind him. This time it was Therion who moved. The cane snapped up with startling speed, its tip striking the stone hard, and from its head a blade hissed free, long and slender, gleaming in the firelight. The second shadow barely had time to register before Therion swept low, the cane sword cutting across his knees. The figure dropped with a choked cry, only to meet the iron tip of the cane driving up under his chin. The body went limp, collapsing in silence. Mylorian straightened, his own assailant unconscious at his feet. His eyes met Therion's across the flickering brazier. "So," Therion said, breathing steady, "that's what your chairman sends these days." Children in black cloth. Mylorian's gaze swept the hall, his voice low and sharp. Not children. Scouts testing the doors. Therion wiped the blade on his sleeve, then slid it back into the cane with a click. "Then let them write this test off as failure." Another shadow stirred in the far arch. Mylorian's hand rose, a pulse of guardian magic snapping through the air. The figure froze mid-step, bound by invisible force, his dagger clattering useless to the ground. Mylorian's voice carried like thunder. "Tell your master the night is not his, not while we still draw breath." The assassin's eyes bulged, terror replacing resolve. Mylorian released the bind, letting him collapse to the floor, gasping, "Run!" The man scrambled to his feet and fled into the corridor's dark. Therion leaned heavier on his cane, the faintest grin tugging at his lips. "You've not lost your touch, old wolf." Mylorian's eyes still burned, sharp as embers. "Nor you, old fox." The brazier hissed, flames leaping high as though the tower itself bowed to the two who owned the night. The last assassin bolted, stumbling into the dark corridor with terror snapping at his heels. His footfalls echoed once, twice, then stopped. Another sound followed, softer, controlled. The steady tread of boots that knew the weight of silence. Mylorian's eyes narrowed. "He's here." From the shadowed arch stepped a tall figure in travel-worn leathers, cloak pinned with the sigil of the Ashenwood. His bow was unstrung at his back, but his hand rested lightly on the hilt of a long knife, and behind him came a half-score rangers, each hard-eyed, each armed. The fleeing assassin was flung forward into the chamber, bloodied and bound, hurled at Mylorian's feet. One of the rangers nudged him with a boot. "Caught your rat trying to run." The leader stepped into the brazier's glow. His hair was streaked with silver, but his eyes were bright, steady, sharp as the forests he'd walked all his life. He looked at Mylorian and smiled faintly, not with surprise, but with recognition. "You call, I come," he said simply, voice low and certain. "As I always have." Mylorian's shoulders eased for the first time that night. He clasped the ranger's arm, the gesture tight with old trust. "And I knew you would." Therion exhaled, leaning heavier on his cane sword, though his eyes glimmered with approval. "Took your time, forest boy." The ranger's smile widened a fraction. "We came as fast as the wind allowed. And we brought more than knives in the dark." His men fanned out, taking positions at the hall's entrances, watchful, ready. The brazier hissed, flames rising higher, the chamber no longer a place of shadows but of steel and resolve. Mylorian's gaze swept the room from the captured assassin at his feet to the loyal rangers now standing guard. His voice was iron. Elendor wanted the night for himself. Now the night belongs to us. The brazier's flames snapped as Mylorian knelt beside the fallen assassins. He searched them methodically. Belts, boots, collars, seams. Nothing. No insignia, no orders, not even the faintest trace of coin. "Clever," Therion muttered. His cane tapped the stone beside a corpse. "Erase the trail before it begins." Mylorian's jaw tightened. He turned the last body, found the same emptiness, then rose with a grim shake of his head. They were ghosts before they entered. No papers, no tokens. Elendor covered his hand well. The bound survivor whimpered at their feet, wrists raw against the rope. The ranger stepped forward, his voice quiet but edged. "He'll talk. Give me a moment, and he'll tell you everything he knows." Mylorian's eyes fixed on the man, then shifted to the door beyond. He shook his head, voice firm. "No, we don't have the time. If Elendor sent knives for us, he's already moving against them." "The girls," Therion said, his voice low but heavy. Mylorian nodded once, sharp and certain. "We go now. Secure them. Or there may be no dawn left to see." The ranger gestured, and his men fell into formation, bows strung, blades loose at their hips. The bound assassin was dragged aside like discarded baggage. Mylorian strode to the door, his cloak sweeping the stone, his voice steady but fierce. "Elendor's first move has failed. He will strike harder next. We do not give him the chance." Therion's cane struck the floor like a war drum. "Then let's make haste before he finds the courage to try again." The company surged into the corridor, shadows scattering before them. Chapter 15, Knives in the Dark. The still watch draped the chamber in silence. The Mother of Balance sat in meditation, her silver hair gleaming faintly in the torchlight. Aeliana knelt across from her, following her rhythm, though exhaustion tugged at her shoulders. Against the far wall, the 3 Emberborn guards had given in at last. Helmets laid beside them, shields within reach, but eyes closed in weary slumber. Only Lyra remained on edge. She leaned near the door, daggers loose at her hips, gaze flicking between shadows. Every nerve in her body whispered wrong, wrong, wrong. Click. Her blood went cold. She dropped into a roll just as a crossbow bolt slammed into the stone where she'd been standing, splinters spraying across the floor. She came up on one knee, boot knife already in hand. Without hesitation, she snapped her wrist and let it fly. A grunt split the air. A body tumbled from the rafters, crashing to the floor with her blade buried in his throat. "Up!" Lyra barked, but the guards were still half asleep, fumbling for their weapons. Shadows fell from above. 5 figures dropped from the rafters in a coordinated crash, steel flashing in their hands, cloaks trailing like wings of night. Lyra's daggers were in her fists now, her grin feral. "Fine," she hissed. "It's just me then." She darted forward, steel catching torchlight, blades singing as the assassins surged. The first lunged, and she spun low, slashing his thigh, twisting past his strike before driving her second dagger up under his ribs. The room exploded into chaos. Eliana shoved the mother back, shielding her with her own body as she scrambled for her dagger. The Emberborn guards jolted awake, reaching clumsily for shields and spears. But for now, it was Lyra alone holding the line, her knives flashing, her laugh sharp and wild in the still watch. Steel rang against stone as Lyra twisted, her daggers flashing in the torchlight. She ducked beneath one assassin's slash, pivoted, and drove her blade across his throat. He dropped, gurgling as another lunged in his place, but not all came for her. Two slipped wide, gliding toward the mother where she sat calm and unmoving, her meditation unbroken even as danger closed. Eliana's eyes snapped open. She surged to her feet, her dagger flashing into her hand. She stepped in front of the mother, her stance low and firm. "You'll not touch her!" The first assassin lunged. Eliana parried, sparks spraying, and drove her knee into his gut. He staggered back, and she slashed upward, her blade carving his cheek. The second struck fast, but she turned his thrust aside and countered with a vicious riposte, steel sinking deep into his arm. Behind her, the mother's eyes opened at last. She did not move, did not flinch, only watched with silver calm as the balance played out in blood and steel. The Emberborn guards jerked awake at last, scrambling to their feet, hands snatching for shields and spears. One tripped over his helm, cursed, then shoved into position beside Eliana. Another joined Lyra, spear darting toward an assassin's side. Lyra laughed, breathless but grinning, blood spattered across her cheek. "Well, look who decided to show up. Thought I'd have to do the whole bloody dance myself." One guard grunted, his spear driving home. "We are awake now." "Good for you," Lyra shot back, spinning low to hamstring another attacker before plunging her other dagger into his chest. "Next time, maybe stay awake when killers are dropping from the ceiling." The last three assassins pressed harder, blades whirling, trying to break the defense. Eliana fought with quiet precision, each move driven by duty, her body a shield before the mother. Lyra was all fire and motion, her sarcasm cutting sharper than her blades as she darted in and out of reach. The guards locked shields at last, forming a wall before the mother, their spears darting like striking snakes. But still the assassins came, their eyes cold, their purpose clear. And the chamber rang with steel, sweat, and the hiss of balance weighed in the still watch. The clash filled the chamber, blades sparking, shadows writhing. Lyra ducked low, her daggers flashing in twin arcs. One assassin reeled back, clutching his stomach, then collapsed without a sound. Beside the brazier, Eliana turned aside a desperate thrust, her arm burning with the effort. She countered cleanly, her blade sliding across the attacker's chest, and he crumpled at her feet. The Emberborn guards, now fully awake, locked shields before the mother, their spears darting in deadly rhythm. One assassin tried to force his way through, only to be skewered twice, once in the chest, once in the throat. He dropped, choking as the guards shoved him aside. Only one remained. He spun, wild, cornered, eyes blazing with desperate fury. He lunged at Lyra, blade raised high. She caught the strike on her left dagger, gritted her teeth, and drove her right-hand blade up beneath his ribs. Her grin flashed as he staggered, gasping, before she shoved him back. The assassin hit the stone hard, blood spreading black in the torchlight. He twitched once, then stilled. Silence fell. The guards panted, leaning on their spears. Eliana's chest rose and fell with hard breaths, sweat dripping down her temple. The Mother of Balance sat calm still, her meditation never truly broken, her silver gaze watching the aftermath without fear. Lyra wiped her blade on the last assassin's cloak, her smirk cutting the tension. "Well," she said, breathless but bright, "that was fun." The only answer was the hiss of torches and the quiet drip of blood onto stone. Chapter 16. The Aftermath. The corridors of the council tower stretched silent as stone. Too silent. Lorion's eyes narrowed as their company advanced, rangers at his back. Not a single council guard stood at post, the lanterns guttered, casting more shadow than light. "They've been pulled away," he murmured, "or ordered to turn their eyes." Therion's cane tapped against the flagstones, sharp and restless. "Then we are already late." They moved faster, each corner taken with weapons drawn. The closer they drew to the sequestered chamber, the sharper the sound became. Faint at first, then rising, the unmistakable clash of steel, the grunt of effort, the cry of pain. "Inside!" Maelorion barked. They surged forward. The rangers swept ahead, kicking the doors wide, and froze on the threshold. The chamber reeked of blood and torch smoke. Bodies sprawled across the floor. Assassins in black cloth, their blades stilled. Blood painted the stone. At the centre, the Mother of Balance sat composed, unbroken, her presence calm as a flame cupped in steady hands. Eliana knelt beside her still, dagger drawn, her posture taut and protective, eyes sharp despite exhaustion. The Emberborn guards stood close, shields raised even now, sweat streaking their faces. And Lyra. Lyra crouched over the nearest corpse, rifling through its belt with a dagger still in hand, smirking as though she'd just won a tavern brawl. She glanced up at the stunned company in the doorway. "Oh, look." "Reinforcements. Shame you missed the party." Therion let out a dry huff, not quite a laugh. "By the balance, girl." Maelorion's gaze swept the room cold and hard. Assassins. Not soldiers. His eyes flicked to the doorframe where no guards stood. He meant for them to die here. Lyra pulled a small coin pouch from a corpse, shook it, and arched a brow. "Well, they were kind enough to bring me gifts. Might as well not waste the effort." The rangers fanned into the chamber, weapons still drawn, their boots splashing in pooled blood. Eliana met Maelorion's gaze, her face pale but steady. They came for her. If Lyra hadn't. Her voice trailed, and she looked back at the mother who inclined her head in silent acknowledgement. Maelorion exhaled once, slow and heavy. Then Elendor has already broken the chamber's sanctity. This is no longer politics. This is war in shadows. The torch hissed, casting long, jagged shadows across the bloody floor. Maelorion's gaze lingered on the dead, then on the mother seated calm amid the blood. His jaw tightened. "No more divisions. We move as one." Therion's cane tapped once, sharp. "And where do you think you can keep her safe with Elendor pulling the strings?" Maelorion turned, cloak sweeping as he strode for the door. "The Chamber of the Three." The words hung heavy. Even the rangers glanced at one another, their expressions shifting. That place was legend, sealed, warded, sacrosanct. A vault of balance itself. Not even the chairman could open its doors. Eliana blinked, her voice quiet but steady. "You'd invoke it now?" "I must," Maelorion said. His eyes swept over them all, Lyra with blood still on her blades, Eliana pale but resolute, the Emberborn guards braced, the mother watching in silence. Elendor has already turned shadow into weapon. He will not stop until she lies dead. But he cannot reach within the three. There. We hold until dawn. The mother inclined her head, silver gaze calm. Then lead, counselor. Fire does not fear stone walls, but perhaps balance may guard me one night longer. Maelorion lifted his hand. Form ranks. Stay close. No more lone doors. We move together. The rangers spread, forming a shielded wedge. Eliana and Lyra flanked the mother, weapons drawn. The Emberborn guards braced behind, shields steady once more. Therion's cane struck the floor like a gavel. Then let's walk, before the snake finds another hole. Together they moved into the torchlit corridor, leaving the chamber of blood behind. And as their boots echoed against stone, Melorian whispered, half to himself, half to the balance itself, "Let's see Elendor reach for her now." Chapter 17. Between Blades. The corridor narrowed into a choke point, and there they found them, a wall of council guards, spears levelled, shields locked. Dozens of helms gleamed in the torchlight, their captain's voice ringing cold. "By order of the chairman, you will return to your quarters." Now, the rangers spread without hesitation, bows half drawn, blades loose at their belts. Lyra slid into a crouch beside them, daggers out, her grin a wolf's snarl. The Emberborn guards raised their shields, forming a crimson wall before the mother. Aeliana stepped forward, her voice trembling but firm. "Please, stand down. We are all elves here. Don't let Elendor turn balance into blood." The guards did not lower their weapons. The air was one breath away from breaking. Then the Mother of Balance stepped forward. She moved between the two lines of steel, her crimson robe brushing the stone, her silver hair shining pale in the torchlight. She lifted no weapon, only her voice, calm, clear, steady as flame. "Once before," she said, her voice carrying down the hall, "I stood before soldiers like you." One guard shifted, his spear wavering slightly. "They told you we were dangerous, didn't they?" Her silver eyes found his. "That our creed threatened the balance?" Behind her, Aeliana's breath caught. She'd never heard this part of the story. The mother stepped closer to the guard line. "I watched fire devour our halls. Children crying in the smoke." "Lies!" One guard spat, but his voice cracked. "While one man's ambition wrote itself in ash." The mother's voice hardened. "Elendor." Several guards exchanged glances. Mylorian stepped forward, his single eye blazing. "You know his name," he said quietly. "You've heard the whispers." The questions that don't get answered. The captain's grip tightened on his spear. "The chairman serves the balance." "Does he?" The mother's voice was soft now, deadly. "Then why does he send assassins in the night?" She raised her chin, her eyes burning silver in the torchlight. "Ask yourselves, will you be the hand that carries out his lie? Or will you be the shield that breaks it? Do not let one man's fear write another realm in ash." The silence that followed was heavy, trembling. Some of the guards faltered, their spear points wavering. The rangers eased their bowstrings but did not lower them. And in that breath the choice hung, blood or balance. The corridor pulsed with silence. The council guards held their line, shields locked, spear points steady, but their eyes behind the helms flickered. Doubt. The Mother of Balance stepped closer still, crimson robes brushing against the spear tips. Her voice cut the stillness. "Go to the chamber where you left us sequestered," she said, clear and unwavering. "There you will find the bodies of Elendor's assassins. See with your own eyes whose orders break the balance." A ripple passed through the line. She turned, extending her hand toward Melorian. "Counselor, walk with me." Melorian's jaw clenched. He stepped forward, laying his hand gently over hers. Together they moved, unhurried, into the gap between shield and spear. For a heartbeat the guards held. Then, one by one, the shields parted, spears lifting. The formation opened like a wound, a narrow path revealed. Melorion and the Mother of Balance walked through. Behind them came Aeliana, still at her side. Lyra, with her blades loose and her grin sharp. Therion steady as stone, the Emberborn guards tight as shadows, and the rangers like wolves on the hunt. No word was spoken as they passed, but the eyes of the council guards followed, shaken, uncertain, pierced by doubt. The path carried them to the inner stair, where ancient wards flared at Melorion's touch. The doors groaned open, heavy with age and power. The chamber of the three yawned before them, its wards glittering, its silence absolute. Not even Elendor could enter here. The doors shut with a thunderous finality, sealing them inside. For the first time since the portal crossing, the company drew breath unchained by spears. Chapter 18. Within the Chamber of the Three. The heavy doors sealed shut behind them, the wards flaring with pale blue light before fading into stone. Silence followed, not the tense silence of ambush or spear points, but the deep, protective quiet of a place meant to guard secrets. The Chamber of the Three was vast and solemn. Its walls were carved with runes older than any throne, its floor a circle of polished stone, worn smooth by centuries of council. 3 high seats faced inward, empty now, their presence looming all the same. For a long moment no one spoke. Lyra broke it first, crouching to clean her daggers on a strip of cloth, her smirk crooked. Well, that was fun. Assassins from above, guards in the hall, and Elendor playing Snake in the dark. Anybody else feel like we've had a full season's worth of drama in one night? Therion's cane tapped once, dry and sharp. Your sarcasm will be the death of you, girl. Maybe, Lyra said, twirling a dagger. But it's kept me alive so far. Aeliana sat down beside the Mother of Balance, her face pale with fatigue. I thought they would cut us down in the hall. For a moment, I truly believed it would end there. The Mother reached over, laying her hand gently atop Aeliana's. And yet, you stood. Her voice was soft, steady as the flame. Balance does not require fearlessness, only the will to hold your ground when fear comes. The Emberborn guards shifted, setting their shields aside at last. One spoke quietly. We were not ready. We should have been. If not for her. He nodded toward Lyra. The Mother would have fallen. Lyra's grin sharpened. Don't feel too bad. I've got better ears than most. Comes in handy when someone's trying to put a bolt through my chest. Melorian had said nothing. He stood near the seats of the three, his back straight, his hands clasped behind him. At last he spoke, his voice low and iron. Tonight proves what I feared. Elendor no longer serves the balance, he serves himself. First Thandros, now this. He will burn anyone to keep his place, and if the council does not see it by dawn, then we will be ash before the day is out. The brazier in the chamber's heart flared faintly, its light catching on the runes of the walls. The Mother of Balance lifted her gaze, silver eyes steady. Then let them see me. Let them see the truth with their own eyes. One man's lies ended my realm. I will not let him end yours. Silence followed, not empty, but filled with resolve. The wards hummed faintly in the walls, a low vibration that promised no ear but theirs could hear. Mylorian stood before the seats of the three, his cloak drawn tight, his face carved in shadow. Elendor struck once tonight, he said, his voice iron. He will strike again. At dawn he'll call the council, demand answers, and paint us traitors if he can. Therion tapped his cane against the stone, sharp and impatient. Then we strike first, not with blades but with truth. The scrolls, the assassins, the Mother herself. Put it all on the floor before the rest of the council, before Elendor can twist it. Aeliana's jaw was tight. He will not sit idle while we speak. He will deny, he will turn others against us. Not if we cut him at the knees before he begins, Melorian countered. His eyes swept the room, pinning each of them. We must be precise. 3 blades, not a storm. 1 piece of proof, then the next, then the final strike. The Mother of Balance rose from her seat at the edge of the chamber. Her silver hair gleamed in the brazier's glow, her presence calm but commanding. Then, let it be ordered. I will stand before them. I will say what I saw, what I endured. The destruction of Thandros was not balance. It was Elendor's ambition. Her words pressed into the stone like a brand. Even Lyra, sprawled in her chair, cleaning her daggers, looked up at that. Good, Melorian said, but your voice alone will not sway them. Elendor will call you a liar, a relic. A heretic. Therion unrolled a brittle case from his cloak and set it on the table with a deliberate snap. Then we use his own hand against him. The scroll with Elendor's signature. The order to destroy the portal. Let the council read it for themselves. Lyra's grin was sharp, triumphant. And if that doesn't gut him, the bodies of the assassins will. Council guards found no trace. Strange how the truth always disappears, but not this time. We have corpses to show. Melorian inclined his head. 3 blades. The mother, the scroll, the assassins. Together, undeniable. Aeliana's brow furrowed, worry in her eyes. But if we misstep, then we are ash, Mylorian finished. His voice was calm, final. We do not misstep. The Mother of Balance placed her hand over the brazier. Sparks leapt, casting her in fierce light. Then let us meet dawn with truth sharper than any blade. And let Balance decide which of us stands. The chamber was silent, heavy with resolve. Chapter 19. The Weight of Choice. Dawn broke pale and cold over the council tower. The wards of the Chamber of the Three flared once as Maelorian pressed his hand to the sigils, and the great doors groaned open. The company moved as one into the corridor. Rangers at the fore, ember-born guards close to the mother, Aeliana just off her shoulder. Therion's cane ticked a steady rhythm, while Maelorian's eyes swept every shadow, every guard along the walls. The council guards stood waiting in force, ranks tight, shields grounded. They did not bar the path, but neither did they step aside with pride. Doubt lingered in their eyes, their discipline stretched thin. Somewhere behind them whispers already carried, about assassins, about Elendor's silence, about Balance fraying. The group pressed on. The air was thick with suspicion, but no spear point lowered. Then it happened. A slight figure darted from the edge of the gathered onlookers. A boy no more than 12, dressed in a page's tunic. He slipped through the soldiers like smoke, eyes fixed on one figure only. Lyra. She caught him by reflex, one hand steadying him, the other brushing instinctively toward her dagger. But the boy only pressed something small and folded into her palm. His eyes were wide, frightened, and then he was gone, vanishing back into the press before anyone else noticed. Lyra's grin didn't falter. She tucked her hand into her cloak, the paper crinkling against her palm. Only when no eyes lingered did she glance down and unfold it. The writing was sharp, precise, unmistakable. Your father lives by my hand. Kill the Mother of Balance or watch him die. The choice is yours. The mark beneath the words was Elendor's. Bold. Certain. Lyra's stomach turned to ice, but outwardly her smirk only deepened. She folded the parchment again, slid it into her boot with the same ease she'd draw a knife. Ahead, Maelorian raised his hand, signalling the column to halt as they neared the council's inner hall. The rangers adjusted. The ember-born guards tightened their wall. Lyra flexed her fingers once, the weight of steel familiar and comforting, but the weight in her boot was heavier still. She walked on, daggers at her hips, sarcasm ready on her lips, and a secret burning like poison in her chest. The council chamber thrummed with voices, banners hanging heavy in the high air. Melorian's voice cut through them all, sharp as iron, his words ringing across the marble floor. I stand here to charge Elendor with betrayal of Balance. Not rumour, not conjecture, proof. Gasps rippled. Elendor's face was a mask, but Lyra barely heard them. Her palm brushed the folded parchment hidden in her boot. She could feel the words burning against her skin. Your father lives by my hand. Kill the mother, or he dies. The Mother of Balance sat calm beside Aeliana, her silver gaze steady, her presence like a flame cupped against the storm. Lyra's breath came shallow. Her hand found the hilt of her dagger, fingers curling around the worn leather grip. Slowly, almost reverently, she drew it half free. One step closer, Then another. Her heart pounded in her ears. One thrust. Quick, she wouldn't even scream. And father lives. Lyra! The whisper snapped through the noise. Aliena had turned, her violet eyes fixed on her. Not accusing, not yet. Concern, confusion. Are you all right? Lyra froze, the blade's edge catching the chamber's light. For an instant, her smirk faltered, her mask slipping. Around them, no one else saw. The council's gaze was locked on Mylorian and Elendor, the two giants colliding in words. Only Eliana noticed the storm boiling in Lyra's hand. Lyra's throat tightened, her dagger slid a fraction further from its sheath. One more step, and balance itself would break. The council chamber thrummed with unease as Mylorian stepped alone into the circle, Therion and the rangers waiting behind him at the threshold. Elendor stood already on the dais, his voice smooth as glass, cutting the air. "Councillor Mylorian," Elendor intoned, "you return not with report but with accusation. Betrayal. Conspiracy. You disgrace the balance you swore to serve." Mylorian's cloak shifted as he squared his shoulders, his voice like thunder. "I accuse you because it is true. You destroyed Thandros, not for balance, but for your own ambition. And last night you sought my silence with assassins." Gasps rippled through the chamber. Councillors leaned forward, some bristling, others pale. From the high benches, the other two of the senior three rose. Councillor Valith's voice rang clear, steady. "These are grave words. Against any other, they would be struck as madness. But against Elendor, number. Against him, they must be heard." Councillor Thandor nodded, his eyes fixed on Mylorian. "We know you, Mylorian. You have given your life to Alfheim 100 times over. If you bring this charge, then we must see the proof. Present it." Elendor's eyes narrowed, his mask cracking for an instant. Then his voice lashed out, sharp as a whip. "Proof? He dares to bring armed rangers into the sacred chamber of balance. Soldiers not sworn to the council, blades at his back while he spits slander. This is not loyalty, this is treason." At once the chamber erupted. Voices clashed, councillors shouting over one another, "Remove them! He must present proof. This is sacrilege. Let him speak." The guards at the edges of the chamber bristled, uncertain, their eyes darting between Elendor and Mylorian. Mylorian's voice cut through the storm. "Treason. If not for those rangers, I would not be standing here. They cut down the assassins you sent for me. Their presence is not treason, it is survival." The uproar doubled. Councillors rose from their seats, shouting, pointing, the chamber threatening to tip into chaos. The storm was breaking. The chamber roared with outrage, voices colliding in a storm. Elendor stood tall, his hand raised for silence, his smile thin and cold. But another voice cut through, steady and commanding. "Enough!" The captain of the guard stepped from his post along the wall, his armour gleaming in the torchlight. His face was grim, his voice iron. "I cannot stand silent." The chamber stilled. It was against protocol for the guard to speak unbidden, but his words carried weight no councillor could ignore. The captain drew a breath. "It is true. My men removed 5 bodies from the sequestered chambers last night. Assassins, not soldiers of Alfheim. They carried no marks, no tokens, but their intent was clear. They came for Councillor Mylorian and his companions." Gasps tore through the chamber. Councillors rose to their feet, some shouting, others stunned into silence. Elendor's smile froze. The captain's gaze swept the chamber, then fixed on Elendor. His voice dropped like a hammer. "And by my oath, I reported it to the chairman before dawn." Chaos erupted. Assassins! Inside the council's tower? He knew! Balance, protect us! Elendor's composure cracked, his hand clenching the edge of the dais. "You dare!" But the damage was done. The chamber was fire. Councillors shouting over one another, guards shifting uneasily, the weight of suspicion now falling heavy on the chairman himself. Mylarion stood tall in the storm, his cloak sweeping as he turned to face the chaos. You asked for proof. Now you hear it from your own captain. Will you still call me traitor? The chamber was no longer Elendor's to command. The chamber boiled with shouts, councillors on their feet, guards bristling, rangers tense as bowstrings. Maelorion raised his hand, his voice carried above the storm, deep and commanding. Enough! The uproar faltered. Slowly, reluctantly, the chamber stilled. This is not rumour. This is not conjecture. Proof stands beyond these doors. He turned toward the great entry, his gaze steady. Bring her in. The doors opened with a groan. Chapter 20. The Waiting Room. Aeliana's gaze snapped sideways, sharp and questioning. Lyra, she whispered, her voice tight. Are you all right? Lyra froze, mask cracking for a heartbeat. The blade glinted faintly in the lamplight. Her grin wavered, her throat dry. Before she could answer, the door groaned open. A council guard stepped inside, helm tucked under his arm, his voice clipped and formal. It is time. The council awaits you. The mother opened her eyes. Calm. Certain. She rose smoothly to her feet, crimson robes settling like flame around her. Aeliana stood at once, hand brushing Lyra's arm as if to anchor her. Come. Lyra shoved the dagger back into its sheath in one sharp motion, her grin snapping back into place like armour. After you? The Emberborn guards gathered their shields, falling in around the mother as the council guard led them into the hall. Lyra lingered a step behind, boot pressing against the parchment hidden there, Elendor's words burning in her mind, kill the mother, or your father dies. Her smirk never faltered, but her hand twitched near her blade. Into the chamber walked Aeliana, her jaw set, hand never straying far from her dagger. Beside her strode Lyra, smirk fixed in place though her eyes gleamed sharp. Behind them came the Emberborn guards, crimson shields bright against the pale stone. And at their heart, the Mother of Balance, crimson robes trailing, silver hair gleaming, her presence calm and unshaken. The chamber gasped, voices breaking into shocked whispers. Ashborn, heretic, survivor. The words rippled like fire through dry grass. Elendor's face tightened, but his smile did not falter. Only his eyes betrayed him, sharp as blades as they locked on Lyra. His lip curled in a sneer, subtle but clear, the message burning between them. Do it now. Lyra's hand brushed the hilt of her dagger. The folded parchment in her boot seemed to pulse like a heartbeat. She met Elendor's stare with her own, her grin sharpened, but her throat tightened with the weight of choice. The mother did not falter. She moved past the whispers, past the stares, her gaze fixed on Maelorion. When she reached him, she stopped at his side, opposite Elendor. Her silver eyes lifted, steady, unafraid. Mylorion's cloak shifted as he turned to face Elendor across the circle. You wished for proof, he said, his voice iron. Here it stands. The last survivor of Thandros, leader of the Emberborn, the balance that you sought to erase. The chamber erupted again, half in shock, half in outrage. Guards shifted, some uneasy, some raising their spears. The council floor trembled on the edge of blood and revelation, and Lyra stood only steps away from the Mother of Balance, her dagger loose in her hand, Elendor's sneer burning in her mind. The chamber boiled with voices. Councillors shouted, guards bristled, Maelorion's thunder and Elendor's venom clashed like steel. All eyes fixed on the storm, on the chairman and the councillor, on the Mother of Balance, calm as flame at Mylorion's side. No one watched Lyra. She slipped a smaller dagger from beneath her cloak, the kind made for shadows and close work. Its blade gleamed faintly before vanishing again against her wrist as she palmed it. Her grin curved sharp as she paced nearer, matching Eliana's steps, her eyes never leaving the mother. Elendor's gaze flicked to her through the chaos. He saw the glint, the way her hand shifted, and he sneered, "Do it now." Lyra moved slow, measured, circling closer to the mother's side. To anyone else, she was simply guarding her charge. To Elendor, she was delivering his will. She drew in a breath, and at the last step, she pivoted. Her dagger flashed up and across the chamber, her body snapping into motion faster than anyone could track. Elendor's eyes went wide, triumph turning to confusion, then horror, as the steel plunged into his chest. The chamber gasped, voices breaking, guards lurching, balance itself seeming to shudder. Lyra leaned in close, her grin wicked, her voice a razor at his ear. "No one threatens my family and lives." She twisted the blade. Blood spilled across his robes. Elendor staggered, choking, his eyes locked with hers as the life drained from them. Chapter 21. The Council Floor. Elendor collapsed, dead before his body hit the stone. Silence swallowed the chamber for one stunned heartbeat. Then the room erupted. "Seize her!" Council guards surged forward, spears levelled, hands grabbing for her arms. Guardians vaulted the benches, their voices shouting, their faces white with shock. Lyra didn't fight. She let them wrench the dagger from her hand, twist her arms behind her back, slam iron restraints across her wrists. Her smirk stayed fixed, cold and sharp, even as a dozen blades pressed against her. Melorian stood frozen for a moment, cloak heavy at his shoulders, the weight of what had just happened pressing down like a stone. His voice cut through the uproar, low but thunderous. This is not how balance is served." The chamber quieted, every eye turning to him. Lyra lifted her head, her violet gaze flicking to Melorian. Her grin curved sharp as ever, though her eyes gleamed with something harder beneath. She had a choice. Keep the note hidden or spit the truth into the fire. Her boot pressed against the folded parchment still tucked inside, Elendor's words burning in her memory. "Kill the mother, or your father dies." The uproar shook the chamber like thunder. Councillors shouted, guards bristled, rangers stood tense with bows half raised. Melorian's voice had barely cut through before the tide threatened to sweep them all away. Then the Mother of Balance stepped forward. Her crimson robes trailed across the marble, her silver hair gleamed like moonlight, and her presence seemed to drink the noise from the room. Slowly, steadily, the uproar fell to a hush. She stopped beside Elendor's body, looking down at him with neither triumph nor grief, only certainty. When she raised her eyes to the council, her voice carried clear and unshaken. "The rot within your council is dead." The words struck like a hammer. Silence followed, sharp and absolute. "For centuries," she continued, "you were told Thandros fell by its own weakness, that balance demanded its ruin. But I was there. I watched my people burned, my realm erased. And I tell you now, it was not balance. It was this man's ambition." She gestured to Elendor's corpse. Councillors shifted uneasily, whispers starting anew. But her voice rolled over them, iron and flame together. "You see me standing here, the last of the Emberborn, leader of those who survived. My people still live, in ash, in exile, in fear, and you were told we did not exist. Ask yourselves why." The chamber trembled on the edge of revelation. Even the guards who held Lyra paused, their grips loosening as the mother's words pulled the weight of attention away from her and onto the truth. Melorian drew in a long breath, his gaze flicking from the mother to the council benches. "You asked for proof. You have it. Living, breathing, undeniable." The mother's voice rolled through the chamber like steady fire. "Ask yourselves why his lies stood so long. Ask yourselves how balance was twisted into ash." Her gaze swept the chamber, then turned, sharp, unwavering, to Lyra. "This warrior," she said, her voice carrying to the high seats, "saved us last night. She stood when assassins struck, when shadows fell upon my life, and she saved me." The guards holding Lyra faltered, their grips loosening as eyes turned from her to the mother. The mother stepped closer, silver eyes bright, her words cutting the air. "And here, before your very eyes, she has given me more. Long overdue justice." Gasps rippled across the benches. The mother lifted her chin, her voice resolute. "So hear me now. I offer her sanctuary in my realm. No chains, no condemnation. She is under my protection, and her blade is no crime but balance served." For a heartbeat, the chamber was silent, stunned by the audacity of it. Then voices broke, some in protest, others in support. Sanctuary? Balance served? She killed the chairman. Or freed us from his lies. Maelorian's expression was unreadable, but his eye flicked to Lyra, weighing her smirk against the truth now spoken aloud. Therion's cane tapped once against the stone, his voice dry but certain. "Well, the balance does have a sense of humour." The chamber roiled with shouts, councillors half rising from their seats, guards frozen between orders and uncertainty. The mother's declaration hung in the air like a drawn blade. Then came the steady tap, tap, of a cane across marble. Therion moved to the centre of the floor, his lined face hard, his voice dry but carrying clear. "Order." The noise stilled. Not entirely, but enough. Even Elendor's loyalists turned toward him. He looked from the mother to the council benches, his eyes sharp despite the weight of years. "I am Therion of the Archives. I have spent my life among your records, your histories, your laws. And by those laws, this council must listen." He gestured with his cane toward the Mother of Balance. The Emberborn were never erased from the codices of Alfheim. Their realm was recorded as fallen, not destroyed, their sovereign voice unseated, not extinguished. Which means... He let the silence stretch, his cane tapping once more for emphasis. Which means that the Mother of Balance stands before you as the rightful leader of a realm. A guest sovereign within Alfheim. Gasps rippled through the benches. Therion's gaze hardened. And by ancient oath, the life of any guest sovereign is sacrosanct. To see her slain on Alfheim's soil would not be balance. It would be an act of war between realms. Murmurs rose, some sharp with alarm, others hushed with dawning realization. He turned back toward Lyra, still bound in the guard's grip. This warrior acted to protect the life of a guest sovereign within these walls. The mother herself claims her, and by Alfheim's own law she may grant sanctuary. Whether you call it justice or vengeance, the law names it balance. The chamber erupted anew, louder than before, but now the noise carried fear and weight, not just outrage. Maelorian's voice boomed over it, iron and unyielding. "You heard him. You heard her. The balance has spoken, and the lie is ended." The uproar rattled the chamber like thunder, councillors shouting, guards shifting, balance itself trembling. Elendor's blood still stained the marble, his body lying heavy in silence while voices clamoured around it. Maelorian raised his hand, his voice booming over the storm. "This council will recess." The benches quieted, shocked into silence by the iron in his tone. "We will address the body before us, and restore this chamber. At midday we reconvene, and we will speak of what has transpired here with order, not chaos." His gaze swept the chamber sharp and unyielding. "This is the will of the Senior Three." Velith and Thandor rose at once from their seats, their voices ringing in support. "We second the motion." "The recess stands." Maelorian's cloak shifted as he turned, his commands already falling into place. "Aeliana?" She stepped forward, tense but steady. "You will secure Lyra in the sequestered quarters," Maelorian ordered, his voice quieter but no less heavy. "She will be safe until this council reconvenes." Aeliana bowed her head, It will be done. Her hand touched Lyra's arm, gentle but firm, even as the guards still held her. Melorian's gaze turned next to the rangers. You will guard the Mother of Balance. No hand will touch her until this council has heard her voice in full. The ranger captain inclined his head, his men already shifting into protective formation around the crimson-robed figure. Therion's cane struck the floor once, dry as judgment. Order in the balance, if only for now. Slowly the chamber began to move again. Guards shifted toward Elendor's body, councillors whispered fiercely among themselves, and the benches emptied into the echoing halls. But the shadow of midday already loomed. Chapter 22. The Sequestered Quarters. The heavy door shut behind them with a hollow boom. Iron locks slid into place, leaving Lyra and Aeliana alone in the sequestered room. 2 guards posted outside. The air was close, heavy with the echo of shouts still ringing in Lyra's ears. She dropped onto the bench, chains clinking around her wrists, and smirked. Well, that went better than expected. Aeliana didn't answer. She stood a moment watching her, arms crossed, violet eyes sharp. You were going to do it, she said quietly. Back there, before the doors opened. I saw it in your hand. You were ready to strike the mother. Lyra's grin flickered, then returned sharper than before. And yet, here I am, saving her instead. Funny how that works. Don't lie to me, Lyra. Aeliana's voice was steel now, low but firm. Something's wrong. What are you not saying? For a heartbeat, Lyra said nothing. Then she shifted, pulling her boot up onto the bench. From inside the cuff, she drew the folded parchment, now smudged and creased from the march. She tossed it into Aeliana's lap. Read it. Aeliana's fingers trembled as she unfolded the note. Her eyes scanned the sharp, precise script. Your father lives by my hand. Kill the mother, or watch him die. Her breath caught. Elendor. Yeah. Lyra leaned back against the wall, her smirk gone, her eyes hard. That was the game. He thought he owned me, thought I'd trade balance for blood. She tilted her head, a grim grin tugging at her mouth. So I traded his. Aeliana's throat worked, words caught between horror and understanding. Lyra's gaze locked on hers, sharp and unflinching. Now you know. Question is, do you keep it to yourself, or do you tell Melorion and the rest that Lyra killed their chairman and maybe family? Aeliana's fingers tightened around the parchment, the words burning into her mind. She looked up slowly, violet eyes meeting Lyra's. You should tell Melorion, she said softly. It would change everything. Lyra's smirk was sharp, but brittle. Yeah, well, maybe I like them thinking I'm dangerous. For a moment the silence stretched, thick as stone. Then Aeliana folded the note with careful hands, set it back on the bench between them, and shook her head. No, it isn't mine to carry. Her voice was firm, resolute. This is your truth, Lyra. Your choice. I won't speak of it unless you do. Not to Melorion. Not to anyone. Lyra blinked, her grin faltering, replaced by something quieter, sharper. She studied Aeliana for a long moment, then leaned back against the wall with a low chuckle. Well, aren't you full of surprises? Aeliana's gaze stayed steady. It's not about surprises. It's about balance, and balance says the choice is yours. Lyra tucked the parchment back into her boot, the smirk sliding back onto her lips like armor. Guess Balance and I agree on something for once. The silence that followed was different, no longer heavy with secrets but taut with understanding. Chapter 23. The Mother's Quarters. The brazier burned low, casting the chamber in a warm, flickering glow. The Mother of Balance sat with her hands folded, her silver eyes watching the flames as though reading truths no one else could see. A soft tap-tap broke the stillness. Therion entered, leaning heavier than usual on his cane. He bowed his head slightly. Mother? Archivist, she replied, her voice calm, welcoming. You carry weight tonight. Speak it. Therion drew closer, lowering himself into the chair opposite her with a grunt. He studied her for a long moment before sighing. You offered sanctuary for the girl before the council. That was bold. Her lips curved faintly. Bold is sometimes balance. Therion's cane tapped once against the floor. But bold declarations must be bound in law, or the council will gnaw them apart come midday. He leaned forward, his sharp eyes fixing on hers. Sanctuary is your right to give, but she must ask for it, formally, willingly. Without that, it is nothing but sentiment. The mother nodded slowly. Yes, law must be spoken as well as felt. Therion exhaled through his nose, fingers drumming against the head of his cane. The girl is stubborn. Proud she hides behind that grin, but pride runs deeper than steel in her. She will not beg, not even when her life depends on it. The mother tilted her head, silver hair catching the brazier's glow. Then I must remind her. It is not begging. It is choosing. A silence stretched between them, heavy but steady. Finally, Therion leaned back, lips twitching in the shadow of a smile. Then perhaps balance has a chance after all. The mother rose, her crimson robes whispering against the stone. I will go to her. If she is to choose, she will not do it through others. She must speak to me herself. Therion inclined his head, respect glinting in his eyes. Then may the balance guide your words. And hers. Chapter 24. The Sequestered Quarters. The iron lock scraped, and the door opened. Eliana rose at once from her place near the wall, hand brushing the hilt of her dagger. The mother of balance stepped inside, crimson robes trailing, silver eyes calm but unyielding. Behind her the rangers closed the door, leaving the chamber sealed once more. Eliana bowed her head. Mother. The mother raised a hand, cutting her off gently. Guardian Eliana, you have kept faith. But now this is mine to carry. Her voice filled the small room, quiet yet commanding. I take full charge of Lyra, her safety, her judgment, her path. She is under my responsibility now. Eliana's lips parted, hesitation flickering across her face. Her eyes darted to Lyra, lounging against the wall, chains at her wrists, smirk firmly in place, then back to the mother. You mean to claim her? The mother inclined her head. Yes, she gestured lightly toward the door. You may wait outside. Balance requires privacy here. For a long moment Eliana didn't move. Her violet eyes lingered on Lyra, concern flickering in their depths. Lyra raised her bound hands, rattling the chains with a grin. Go on, Guardian. I'll be on my best behavior. Promise. Eliana's jaw tightened, but she bowed to the mother and stepped out, the door shutting heavily behind her. Now only Lyra and the mother remained. The mother of balance crossed the chamber slowly, her silver gaze fixed on Lyra. You are not here as a prisoner, she said, her tone calm, steady. You are here because balance requires choice. And now you must make it. Lyra's smirk wavered, just slightly. Lyra leaned back against the wall, chains clinking as she lifted her bound wrists in mock salute. So what's this then? You here to scold me? Or thank me for saving your life? I'm not picky. The mother of balance stopped before her, silver eyes unwavering. Enough. The word landed like a stone. You hide behind smirks and clever words because it's easier than choosing, she said, voice steady, sharp as tempered steel. You killed Elendor, but that does not make you free. It makes you hunted. Without sanctuary, the council will tear you apart. Not for what you did, but for what you are. Lyra tilted her head, grin sharp, though her eyes flickered. And what's that supposed to mean? A girl who frightens them, a blade they cannot control, a reminder that truth will not kneel. The mother leaned closer, her voice dropping low. I will not beg you, child. I offer you sanctuary, but you must ask it. Only then does it bind. Only then does it mean anything. For once, Lyra's grin faltered. Her throat tightened, fingers flexing against the iron cuffs. I don't beg. Not for anyone. The mother's expression softened, but her words did not. Then do not think of it as begging. Think of it as choosing where you belong. You've lived in shadows long enough. Will you stand in balance or not? The silence between them thickened, heavy as stone. Lyra's smirk twitched, her pride warring with the weight of the truth staring her down. The silence pressed heavy between them, broken only by the hiss of the brazier and the faint rattle of Lyra's chains as she shifted. Her grin snapped back into place, brittle but sharp. Guess you'll just have to keep waiting, mother. I don't dance on command. The mother of balance studied her a moment longer, silver gaze unflinching. Then she straightened, folding her hands before her. So be it. Balance does not beg. But when the moment comes, you will speak, or you will be swallowed. Lyra tilted her head, smirk cutting wide. We'll see. A knock broke the standoff. The door creaked open and a council guard stepped in, helm tucked under his arm. His eyes flicked between them, uneasy. It is time. The council reconvenes. The mother inclined her head, calm as ever. Then let us go. She turned, crimson robes whispering as she moved past the guard. Lyra pushed herself off the wall, chains clinking, smirk still painted across her face. But her eyes lingered on the mother's back, thoughts churning like knives in the dark. The door shut behind them, and the path to the council chamber awaited. Chapter 25. The Walk to Judgment. The corridors of the council tower felt narrower than usual, the air thick with whispers. Guards lined the walls, helms shadowing their faces, their eyes tracking every step as the small procession moved. The mother of balance walked at the centre, her crimson robes trailing like fire across the pale stone. Lyra followed in her wake, chains at her wrists, her smirk sharp enough to cut through the silence. A pair of rangers flanked them, hands never far from their blades. Behind them the door thudded shut and footsteps quickened to catch up. Aeliana slipped into step, her violet eyes flicking between the mother and Lyra. Her hand brushing her dagger through her expression was unreadable. No one spoke, but the silence carried more weight than shouting. Every guard who watched them pass knew what had happened that morning. They had seen the body carried away, the blood scrubbed from marble. And now they saw the girl in chains, walking beside the last sovereign of a realm, thought lost to ash. By the time they reached the council chamber's antechamber, the whispers had swelled into a tide. The lead guard stopped, turning sharply. Wait here. His tone was clipped, uneasy, as he gestured them into a waiting room lined with carved benches and shuttered windows. The rangers posted themselves by the door. The mother entered without pause, seating herself with calm composure. Aeliana followed, her posture taut but steady. Lyra strolled in last, dragging her chains across the stone as though it were all a game, her grin daring anyone to call it otherwise. The door shut, sealing them in. The council floor lay only a wall away. The waiting room was thick with silence, broken only by the hiss of torches outside and the faint creak of rangers shifting at their post. The mother of balance sat serene, eyes half closed, as though she could wait for eternity. Lyra lounged on the bench beside Aeliana, chains rattling softly as she stretched them for her own amusement. Her smirk was razor-sharp, but her eyes were restless, flicking to the door, to the mother, then back again. Aeliana leaned closer, her voice low enough that only Lyra could hear. Tell them. Lyra arched a brow, grin widening. Tell who what? The council, Aeliana pressed, her tone soft but firm. Tell them about the note. About Elendor. If you don't, they'll only see you as his killer, not his victim. Lyra's smirk held, but her fingers tightened against the chain links, metal clinking softly. Victim. Cute. Doesn't suit me. This isn't about pride, Eliana whispered. Her violet eyes were sharp, urgent. This is about survival. You told me. Now tell them. Show them why you did it. For a heartbeat, Lyra said nothing. Then she leaned back against the wall, grin flashing, her voice dripping with sarcasm. Maybe I like being the monster in their story. Keeps them guessing. But her smirk didn't quite reach her eyes. Across the room, the Mother of Balance opened her eyes and looked at them, calm and piercing, as though she'd heard every word despite the whisper. Chapter 26. The Council Reconvenes. The council chamber pulsed with tension, marble floors gleaming faintly in torchlight, banners fluttering like silent omens, and rows of tense councillors and guards clasped in uneasy stares. Senior Councillor Valith stood, head high. His voice, steady and authoritative, echoed across the chamber. Alfheim stands at a crossroads. There is no time for indecision. We move that Councillor Maelorion be instated as temporary chairman until the council can properly convene and elect a successor. Thandor, the other senior 3-member, rose in unison. The motion stands. We call for a vote, now. Maelorion remained silent, as though the weight of his new responsibility pressed down like stone. But the intensity in his eyes did not waver. The council guards shifted in their posts, uncertainty and skepticism flickering through the ranks of councillors. Elendor's loyalists frowned, their whispers igniting growing disquiet. Without pause, Valith raised his hand again, signalling for the vote. A quick, resounding murmur echoed through the benches, for and against, but Maelorion's name carried a renewed sense of necessity, of stability. When the vote closed, the chamber's echo answered, unanimous aye. Valith nodded gravely. The council is now seated under Chairman Maelorion. Temporarily, so that we may deal with the matters of the morning in order and with clarity. Maelorion bowed his head to acknowledge the confirmation, cloak shifting around him like armour of authority. May balance guide our words and actions. The vote had ended. Maelorion now sat in the chairman's high seat, its carved oak and ancient runes seeming heavier than iron upon his shoulders. His face betrayed no strain, but his hand rested against the armrest like a stone anchoring the chamber. The doors at the far end creaked open. "Bring her in," Valith commanded. Chains rattled as Lyra was escorted into the chamber by 2 guards. Eliana walked at her side, chin high, her violet eyes hard on anyone who dared whisper. The Mother of Balance followed, flanked by rangers, her crimson robes trailing fire across the stone. The council chamber stirred, whispers like blades cutting the air, the killer, the ember-born sovereign, balance and chaos, side by side. Lyra's grin curled sharp as she sauntered forward, chains clinking like jewellery. She stopped in the circle of judgment, her violet eyes flicking to Maelorion in the high seat. "Nice chair. Suits you." Therion stepped into the centre, unfurling a scroll. His voice rang clear, carrying the weight of centuries of law. "Lyra of Alfheim, you stand accused of the slaying of Chairman Elendor, on the floor of this council, with blade drawn and intent undeniable. By ancient law, such an act is high treason, punishable by death. How do you plead?" The chamber went silent, the weight of every eye pressing down on her. Lyra tilted her head, smirk curling, and rattled her shackles like jewellery. "Treason?" "You make it sound so ugly," her grin sharpened. "I call it cutting out rot." Gasps tore through the chamber. Councillors rose from their seats, some shouting for her death, others demanding silence, the uproar shaking the marble like thunder. Guards shifted uneasily, spears twitching toward her. From the high seat, Maelorion's voice boomed iron over the storm. "Order!" His hand struck the armrest like a gavel. "This chamber asks for your plea, not your wit. Speak it true." Lyra looked up at him, eyes gleaming, grin wicked. "Don't like my wit?" "Shame. It's all I've got." The uproar swelled again, voices colliding, balance itself trembling on the edge of chaos. Then the mother of balance rose, her crimson robes whispering against the marble. She lifted her hand and the noise fell as if smothered. Her silver eyes fixed on Lyra, piercing, unwavering. "Child," she said, her voice calm but cutting, "do not waste this moment. Speak the truth, not for me, but for balance." Across the circle, Aeliana stepped forward, her voice low but firm, carrying just enough to reach Lyra. "Tell them." "Now." For a heartbeat, Lyra's smirk held. Then it faltered. She straightened, chains rattling, her voice rising above the hush. "I did it." The words cracked the silence like a blade drawn. "I put my dagger through Elendor's heart, and I'd do it again. He sent knives for us in the night. He hunted her." She jerked her chin toward the mother. "And he threatened my family. That's not balance, that's tyranny." The council erupted, half in shock, half in outrage, but Lyra's voice cut above it, sharp and defiant. "So I ask it now." She turned to the mother, eyes hard but burning. "Grant me sanctuary as sovereign of the Emberborn. I acted to protect your life on Alfheim's soil. Let them call it what it is. Justice long overdue." The mother's gaze softened, but her voice thundered. She stepped forward, silver eyes blazing. "So spoken. So granted. By my right as sovereign, I claim her. Her blade was mine to bear, and mine to shield. Let this council deny me, if they would invite war." The chamber exploded. Councillors shouted over one another, some pale with fear, others red with fury. Guards bristled, torn between orders and oaths. From the high seat, Maelorian's voice boomed once more, louder than the storm. "Order! By balance! Order!" But the chamber had already been split wide open. The chamber roared, balance itself teetering. Guards bristled, councillors shouted, and the rangers' hands hovered at their blades. From the high seat, Maelorian's fist slammed against the armrest, the runes there flaring with ancient light. His voice thundered over the storm. "Enough! This council will not dissolve into madness on my watch. Guards, remove the accused from the floor. She will be held until this chamber is ready to deliberate." The uproar faltered. Guards surged forward, iron boots striking marble, and seized Lyra's chains. She did not resist, only smirked wider, her violet eyes dancing as if daring them all. Aeliana fell in step at her side, hand brushing her dagger but chin high, escorting her out as though she were her honour guard, not her jailer. When the doors boomed shut behind them, the silence that followed was strained but holding. The chamber exhaled as though it had been teetering on the brink of blood. Maelorian's voice carried, deep and steady. "The council is restored. We will proceed." From the floor, the mother of balance rose, her crimson robes whispering, her silver eyes unflinching. "This girl has no defence appointed to her," she said, her voice calm but sharp enough to cut through marble. "Is this the way of Alfheim? To accuse without counsel? To condemn without voice? That was the way of my realm once before Elendor burned it to ash. Will you repeat his crime here?" The benches stirred uneasily. She lifted her chin. "If no other will stand, then I will. I claim the right to speak in her defence." The chamber murmured, some in protest, others nodding gravely. No one rose to deny her. The mother's voice deepened, carrying to every corner of the hall. "And hear this as well. You think her plea was only arrogance, but I heard more. I heard what you did not, what you refused to listen to." She said it plainly to Aeliana, and to me before the doors opened. The chamber leaned forward, hushed now. The chairman himself gave her the choice. Kill me, or her father would die this day. His own words, balance perverted into threat. She chose balance, though it cost her everything. That is why Elendor lies in ash and blood, not because she sought vengeance. Gasps rippled across the chamber. Councillors exchanged frantic whispers, guards stiffened, and the air trembled with the weight of revelation. From the high seat, Melorian leaned forward, his single eye fixed on the benches. His voice was low but iron. You wished for truth. Now you have it. What say you? The chamber rippled with gasps and whispers after the mother's revelation, the weight of her words pressing like stone. For a long moment none dared speak. Then, from the benches, a councillor rose. His robes were formal, his face grave. He bowed slightly to Melorion, before turning to the chamber. By law, the Mother of Balance speaks true. She is sovereign of the Emberborn, and her right to grant sanctuary is binding. His voice carried, heavy but even. But this council cannot ignore the blood on these stones, nor the danger of a girl who strikes without hesitation. Murmurs rose, swelling again. The councillor lifted his hand for silence. I move that we approve the sanctuary as law demands, but with stipulation. The girl shall not remain in Alfheim. She will be exiled to the Emberborn realm under the Mother's protection. There she will live by their law, not ours. In this way, balance is preserved, justice is acknowledged, and Alfheim's peace is kept. The chamber roared again, half in approval, half in protest. From the high seat, Melorion's gaze swept the benches, his voice booming. You have heard the motion. This council will decide. Sanctuary with exile. The guards straightened, councillors leaned forward, and the weight of the vote loomed over them all. The chamber buzzed with unease, voices rising and falling like a restless tide. But no councillor dared speak in Elendor's defence. Not now, not after what had been laid bare. His name was ash on their tongues. Melorion's hand struck the armrest of the high seat, the runes flaring faintly. His voice boomed across the benches. You have heard the motion. Sanctuary, by the Mother of Balance's right, with exile, to her realm. This council will decide. Silence fell, sharp and brittle. One by one, councillors rose from their benches. Some bowed their heads, others squared their shoulders, a few muttered under their breath. But each gave their vote. Aye, aye, aye. The word echoed again and again, heavy as stone. No voice spoke against, not one. When the last councillor sat, the chamber held its breath. Myalorion's gaze swept the hall, his face carved in shadow. Then he spoke, his tone deep and final. The motion carries. By the will of this council, Lyra is granted sanctuary under the sovereign of the Emberborn. By condition she is exiled from Alfheim and will reside under Emberborn law. So it is spoken. So it is done. A ripple passed through the benches. Not applause, not triumph, but grim acceptance. The Mother of Balance inclined her head, her silver eyes gleaming. Balance holds. The echo of Lyra's words still lingered as the doors shut behind her. For a time the council chamber sat in uneasy silence, the marble floor gleaming, the air heavy with the scent of fresh oil on the torches, and the shadow of Elendor's absence pressing in like a void. Melorion rose from the high seat, cloak settling around him like storm clouds. His voice carried, not thunder now, but the iron weight of finality. The business of this council is concluded for the day. The balance demands we temper our words in silence, lest we speak from fire instead of truth. Councillor Valeth stood, bowing his head. So it has always been. We withdraw now into reflection, Councillor Thandor added, his deep voice rolling through the benches. Let each of us meditate on what was witnessed here. At dawn we return not with anger but with clarity. One by one, the councillors rose from their seats. No more shouting, no more debate. Only the rustle of robes and the soft scuff of boots as they bowed toward the high seat and filed from the chamber. Guards dimmed the torches along the walls, leaving the space bathed in the pale glow of ancient ward fire etched into the stone. For a moment, Mylorion remained where he stood, his hand brushing the carved armrest of the high seat. It was still warm from Elendor's presence, a reminder of how swiftly power could rot, and how heavily it now weighed upon him. Only when the last councillor's footsteps faded did he turn, cloak trailing, his face carved in shadow. The Chamber of Balance was empty. Chapter 27. The Sequestered Quarters. The chamber was dim, lit only by a single brazier and the faint ward glow seeping through the runes in the walls. Lyra sprawled on the bench as though it were a throne, chains rattling softly whenever she shifted. Aeliana sat across from her, posture rigid, silent but watchful. The door opened. The Mother of Balance entered, crimson robes trailing like flame. Her silver eyes swept the room calm and steady. She moved to Lyra without pause, her presence filling the chamber like quiet fire. "It is time," she said simply. Lyra tilted her head, smirk curving. "Time to march me off to exile. Can't say Alfheim's hospitality will be missed." Before the mother could reply, another set of footsteps echoed in the hall. Mylorion entered, his cloak heavy, his face lined with fatigue and iron resolve. He carried no scroll, no gavel, only the weight of the high seat in his presence. He stopped before Lyra, his single eye fixed on her. For a moment he said nothing, and the silence pressed heavier than chains. Then he drew a key of etched silver from his belt. Without flourish, he bent and unlocked her shackles. The iron fell away with a sharp clink, echoing in the quiet room. Lyra flexed her wrists, rubbing at the raw skin, her grin flashing sharp. "Didn't think you had it in you." Mylorion's gaze never wavered. "Chains are for the guilty." Sanctuary was granted, and exile decreed. By law you are no prisoner. You walk now under the Mother's protection, not the Council's sentence. The Mother inclined her head, her voice calm and resolute. She walks as Emberborn, and none here will gainsay it. For a heartbeat, Lyra's smirk faltered, not gone but thinner, almost real. She rolled her shoulders, free for the first time since Elendor's fall, and let out a low chuckle. "Well then," she said, "lead the way." Chapter 28. The Portal. The corridors of the council tower echoed with their footsteps. Guards lined the walls, some bowing stiffly, others glaring openly as Lyra passed with chains no longer at her wrists. Whispers followed, rising like smoke. The killer, the exile, the Emberborn's claim. The Mother of Balance walked at the centre, her crimson robes flowing like a banner. 3 Emberborn guards shadowed her, shields on their backs, eyes sharp. Aeliana kept close to Lyra, her violet gaze steady, her words low enough that only she could hear. "Do you want me to send a message to your father?" Lyra's smirk flickered, then returned sharper. "Tell him I'm still breathing." "That'll do." She glanced sideways, grin curling. "And, if he gives you hell, tell him I said to mind his own business." Aeliana's lips tightened, but she nodded once. "I'll tell him." The procession wound down into the lower halls where the portal chamber waited. The air shimmered faintly with ward light, humming against the stone. At the base of the stairs, a figure stood barring the archway. Therion. His cane struck the marble once, his face hard as stone. "Well," he rasped, eyes narrowing at Lyra. "Off to exile, are you?" "Balance knows you've made enough noise on the way." Lyra grinned wide, tilting her head. "Don't tell me you came to see me off." I'll blush. His cane tapped again, sharper this time. "Don't flatter yourself. I came to make sure you don't leave Alfheim empty-handed." From beneath his cloak, he drew a wrapped bundle. He thrust it out toward her without ceremony. "Take them." Lyra's grin faltered as she unwrapped the cloth. 2 daggers gleamed inside, their twin blades opposites yet whole, one flickering faintly with a red heat, the other cold enough to mist the air. Fire and ice. Her fingers closed around them, and for the first time in days, her smirk softened into something almost real. Guess you did listen during training. Therion's mouth twitched, almost, but not quite. A smile. Daggers always suited you. Quick, close, unforgiving, his eyes sharpened hard as the steel he'd given her. Don't waste them, girl. Or the balance that spared you. Lyra slid the blades into her belt, straightening, her grin curving wicked once more. Don't worry, old man. I'll make them sing. The Mother of Balance stepped past Therion, her voice calm but firm. It is time. The portal flared, its light spilling across the chamber, a doorway back into ash and ember. Lyra took one last look at the Hall of Alfheim, smirk firmly in place, then stepped forward with the Mother, fire and ice at her sides. The portal's glow shimmered, its light painting fire across the chamber walls. The Mother of Balance turned toward it, her guards moving to flank her. Lyra shifted her new daggers at her belt, her smirk flashing as if she already belonged to the flame beyond. Wait, the voice echoed from the corridor. Mylorion stepped into view, cloak heavy, his presence filling the chamber like the weight of stone. He stopped just short of the portal's light, his gaze fixed on the Mother. Before you go, he said, his voice deep, steady. I would ask leave to send an emissary. There is much between our realms that must be spoken, and it cannot wait another age. The Mother inclined her head, silver eyes calm. The balance welcomes discourse. Send your voice, Mylorion, and it will be heard. He bowed his head slightly. Not to the council, not to politics, but to balance itself. Then his gaze turned to Lyra. For a long moment silence stretched between them. His single eye held hers, steady, unreadable. Finally, his voice dropped low, almost gentle. For all you've done, for all the storms you've caused, you are still my apprentice. Lyra's grin faltered, just for an instant. Then she tilted her head, the firelight catching on her smirk. Guess I didn't do too bad then. Mylorion's mouth tightened, almost a smile, before he stepped back, giving the Mother the path. The portal flared brighter, humming with ancient power. The Mother of Balance stepped through first, her guards close. Lyra lingered a heartbeat longer, her smirk curving sharp as a blade. She looked back once at Mylorion, then at Aeliana in the shadows. And then she vanished into the light. The portal sealed behind them, leaving only silence and the faint crackle of wards in the air. Chapter 29. Ash and Ember. The shimmer of the council's portal faded, leaving Lyra and the Mother of Balance standing in the ruin of an outpost. The air was colder here, the stone blackened, the wards faint but steady. It was still Alfheim soil, but far from the tower's reach, a threshold between worlds. 3 ember-born guards spread out, checking corners, their shields catching the light. Aeliana stood with them, quiet, her hand resting near her blade. Lyra stretched her wrists, no longer bound, the weight of her new daggers at her belt. She whistled low. Cozy. Almost feels like home. The Mother of Balance turned to her, silver eyes catching the faint rune light. This is not your home, child. It is a doorway, and beyond it lies the ember-born realm. Lyra smirked, tilting her head. And that's where you expect me to stay? Living out my exile like a good little balance keeper? The Mother's gaze softened, but her voice was steady. No, I know you, Lyra. You will not stay long. You are welcome among us, but you are not meant to be bound to any one place. Lyra blinked, her grin faltering before it returned sharp. Guess you've been paying attention. The Mother inclined her head. I will tell you what I told another wanderer, Ronan. There is another portal, 2 days north through the broken passes. It will take you farther still, beyond ash and ember, into paths no one has walked in an age. For a moment silence stretched. The outpost seemed to hold its breath, the ward light flickering against the ancient stone. Lyra's hand brushed her daggers, the steel whispering of choices yet to come. 2 days, huh? She said finally, her smirk curling. Guess exile won't be so boring after all. The Mother of Balance reached out, her touch light against Lyra's arm. Walk as you will, child, with balance or against it. Either way, the world will feel you, Lyra chuckled, violet eyes glinting. Good. I like leaving a mark. She turned toward the waiting portal, the last gate between Alfheim and the Emberborn realm. The guard stepped into position, the Mother at her side. For a heartbeat, Lyra glanced back at the outpost walls, the runes glowing faint. Then she smirked once more and stepped forward, fire and ice at her hips, her path opening into exile and beyond.